I'm happy they cut. I think they should have cut in June, but it's very important how they communicate and think about why they're able to cut. I think we need to shift the models a lot to where the Federal Reserve recognizes that production in the economy is going to be a key factor in inflation. Right now, they look backward at the inflation rate, and that's been problematic. So then they wait and wait and wait. So that's made them too late. This is not a new problem. This is a problem that the Fed's had for a long time. If you look at the inflation rate, then you miss what's going on in the economy. I think also they have to say something about the dollar, that the dollar is really important. And if you think about the way prices are set, you need to have the purchasing power of the dollar actually support price stability within the economy. And that hasn't been occurring.
And I know you've said previously that a strong dollar, the strength and continuity of the dollar should be an important goal for the Fed. Is there a concern, though, if they are cutting much more, especially as Europe stops cutting, that you get a material weakness in the dollar, and that acts against the very goal that you're trying to accomplish?
I actually argue for a stable dollar, not a strong dollar, because that's going to really affect competitiveness. The U.S. is trying to, and President Trump has a policy of bringing manufacturing to the U.S. So you don't want a strong dollar, but you do want it to be stable in purchasing power so that you don't have an inflation problem. And I think that's what's missing in the Fed's current thinking and statements about it. The upside, there's a huge upside. If you say that you're going to maintain the purchasing power of the dollar or defend the dollar, then you can have the whole yield curve be lower. That's the short end and the long end, which again, we're not achieving so far. In the Biden administration, the Fed cut rates and the yields went up because no one explained or said to the government, you've got to spend less money and you've got to really got to have stronger investment in the U.S. They were regulating it's so harshly that people didn't want to invest. So we have a conducive environment now. It's quite possible for the Fed to shift to a model where they're more welcoming of growth that would allow faster growth without them leaning against it. That's what we have to avoid right now.
And David, again, some very clear ideas here. Have you had any conversations with this government, with Scott Bessent, about maybe being on the Fed next year?
I was very happy with Secretary Bessent's article in the Wall Street Journal and in the magazine International Economy, where he laid out some of the reform challenges for the Fed. And so I think that's going to be really important in where the world goes. Can you get a U.S. Federal Reserve that leads the world toward more stability? And that gives you lower interest rates for the countries that are doing well. It's going to be a bit of a competition among countries to see who's got better regulatory policies, better energy policies, better legislation on stable coins, which the U.S. is right now leading on.
So,
That's
David,
really
if you were
important.
called to help lead this reform, would the answer be yes? Would you join the Fed and ask?
You know, I was honored to serve and would be, and always in. What I want to see is the U.S. do really well with this economic plan, and I think that can lift the whole world too. I really think there is
Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and I am doing a live stream on October 7th, streaming on Rumble, YouTube, and my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Also simulcasting on X Spaces. Thank you for joining. I greatly appreciate it. Please help support the work that I do by making sure you subscribe to all the channels. I have 4 channels on YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. All the links are in the description of this video and all my videos. I also have Substack, TikTok. You can also follow me on X, GETTR. And a great way to help support the work is share the links. Ask your social media to follow me. Go to my website. You can donate. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or Buy Me a Coffee. You can be a paid member to my Patreon channel. You can be a paid member to my Substack channel. But please help support the work that I do. And I have great products. I have ebooks, supplements, and course material in immunology and pulmonology. If you pay attention to what I have to say, you'll be making money in the market and slowing down the aging process by stacking the supplements and paying attention to this holistic approach on how to slow down the aging process and boosting up your immune system and being prepared for the fall and the winter season. If you pay attention, you will be okay. So Thank you for joining. I greatly appreciate it. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver soaps. I have 4 different types. I have the lavender, peppermint. I also have charcoal tea tree and lemongrass. These are very high quality soaps. I use them every day. They're made from structural nano silver. It helps you to it helps to improve your health and wellness, but also you're helping to support the work that I do. All these videos are for free to inform the public on my perspectives of breaking news and how the markets are reacting to such news. Thank you for joining. I greatly appreciate it. Make sure that you use discount 5. You get $5 off any order. I know that's a lot that I said in such a short amount of time, but it is important that you pay attention to the stacks and my advice on how to slow down the aging process. This is something that I've been doing for a very long time. I'm in my 50s. All right. I don't look like I'm in my 50s. And it's if you do what I tell you to do, if you take my advice, you're going to notice that your body is getting better over time. There's a compound effect. All right. Plus, if you pay attention to my perspective on the news, you'll actually learn how to make some money. With that, we have the S&P 500 trading now at 6,744. I have a year-end target of 6,800 to approximately 7,000. After that, we will take a look at year-end, what the structure of the price curve is. I suspect that probably there's going to be a small correction in Q1 or Q2 of next year. But as of right now, the S&P 500 target that I have is between 6,800 to 7,000. It's trading at 6,744. The next resistance level, short term, is 6,800. Support level is the 6,500 level. So with that, let's listen in to some of the news. All right. So let's play what Morning Joe had to say about Speaker Johnson.
The Senate yesterday rejected both Democratic and Republican funding bills for a 5th time. The House remains out of session after Speaker Mike Johnson canceled votes, saying the chamber has done its job in passing.
No. He doesn't want these. He doesn't want Republicans around. He does not want House members around, Willie.
Why?
Well, there are a couple of reasons. If the House members are around,
why don't they swear in
we've heard about the Epstein thing. They'll have enough votes to release the Epstein files. They'll swear in
Yeah,
Democrat.
they good because
That's
he wants
one
to do a
reason.
job.
But I'm starting to think more and more that he doesn't want him around because he has such a small majority. They're going to say, listen, there are a lot of Republicans that are in districts where their people are going to start feeling the pain. Marjorie Taylor Greene, we're going to show a quote from her. She's up in Dalton, Georgia. I know Dalton, Georgia very well. Spent all my summers up in Dalton, Georgia. Let me tell you something. You cut Medicaid funding in Dalton, Georgia. You cut Medicaid funding. In between the Dalton, Chattanooga, sort of, Walker County, Casusta County, Sea Rock City, Ruby Falls, all of those things. You're going to have a lot of rural hospitals hurting. You're going to have a lot of nursing homes hurting. You're going to have a lot of young Georgians, kids not getting the type of care they need to get. Like, that's why Mike Johnson doesn't want Republicans in town, because their constituents are getting hurt. And you look at all of the people in districts that Harris won, and Republicans have a lot of reasons to actually vote with Democrats here and bring back some of these cuts.
And talk about an interesting bellwether. Marjorie Taylor Greene saying to Republicans, guys, this isn't good for us. We want to expand those Medicaid benefits. My constituents like the Affordable Care Act that allows them to have health care. You're taking that away from them. this is bad, says Marjorie Taylor Greene.
That district is a really interesting microcosm of what's happened in the country, because when I was growing up right across the Tennessee state line, it was a secure Democratic seat.
Solid Democrat.
Absolutely. And then in 1992, a guy named Pat Buchanan does extremely well up there in the primaries against Bush 41.
Right.
And now it's this, deep red district, but with this, they need government.
Well, I mean, it's like my district. It's in Northwest Florida. It was a Democratic district from Reconstruction up until 1994. But man, when I campaigned, I didn't go to the Republican meetings first. I went to the Ross Perot United We Stand meetings first and nailed down my base there. Then I nailed down the as I called them, the wine and cheese Republicans. And then I had, and that's what a lot of these districts are. They are conservative, but they are populist, and the people in those districts their parents need Medicaid funding. Their children need Medicaid funding. And more important than that, even if they're not on Medicaid, the healthcare facilities they go to are overwhelmingly dependent on Medicaid. So they're having to shut down parts of their hospitals. They're having to fire staff. They're having to get rid of pediatricians. They're having to get rid of the people who take care of their parents in the later years of their life. This is bad news for Republicans. A $1 trillion slash from healthcare funding to give $1 trillion in tax cuts to Elon Musk and the richest people in the world.
Yeah, it's so easy to just take the Beltway perspective and who's up, who's down politically. And it's important to remember the real people who are being involved by this, whether they live in blue districts or red districts or swing districts. And you're absolutely right. We still have underwater the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill is. Right now, there's a lot of messaging wars in terms of the shutdown, but at the end of the day, Republicans do control all three branches of government. Odds are they're going to take a lot of the blame, Mike. And I also think it's not a helpful look when the House Speaker keeps Republicans away. They can't do their job. First of all, I think it's more of a storyline that there's a district in Arizona that does not have representation in Congress right now. Just constituent services. They do not have a congresswoman because Mike Johnson won't seat her because of all this and because of the Epstein matter. And, just wanting to keep Republicans at home, that's going to make people think, wait, they're abandoning me.
The sub-lead in the sub-lead in this story, if you had newspapers still, we still have a few newspapers, but the sub-lead would be what you just said. They need government. Republicans need government as well as Democrats, especially Republicans, as Joe just explained, who depend on Medicaid, who depend on traveling and get covered by the ACA and are worried about their premiums going up and things like that. They're not Republicans or Democrats when it comes to health care. And the fact that it's been avoided, linking the two, partially is a result of Johnson decided not to have Republicans hanging around Washington because they would be forced to talk about their constituents when asked.
So Jim Vandehei, you're there in Washington watching how this all plays out. The Marjorie Taylor Greene element is fascinating, calling for extension of those Obamacare subsidies. How do you see this fever breaking, if you see it breaking? Donald Trump expressed yesterday, the changes from day to day, but some willingness to negotiate a little bit. Where is the room for negotiation here?
I mean, it has to be around those subsidies, right? And Republicans don't want to do it. And I think Democrats feel they probably do want to do a deal, but the leadership is under so much pressure because the base just feels like they're weak and inept, and that this is their one chance to actually make a stand against the president. So I think this could drag on a little bit longer than people realize. And I think one of the ticking time bombs of American politics right now is healthcare. You're seeing a glimpse. You're only seeing a glimpse of it right now because you have these Medicaid cuts that are going to kick in that obviously affects people who are either in a bad place in life or not making that much money. You have these Obamacare subsidies that are the price of your premiums about to go up. And then anybody who's getting employer-based healthcare, there's already been reports out there. I was just talking to one of the biggest insurers. The average premium is going to go up 18%. just because people need more care. I'm in the middle of budgeting at Axios. Ours is going up way more than 18%. So then when you're an employer, you have to think about, okay, do we eat all of that, or do you have to pass it on to your employees? If you do pass it on to your employees, they're having to pay more out of pocket ultimately for health care. So this is a huge problem. And part of it is just the nature of having this like partially private, partially public healthcare system that we have that's growing insanely expensive and insanely inefficient. And I think this is just a taste of it. And I think for Republicans, especially if you're in a tight district, and you're someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who there's this strain of MAGA that is kind of purist in its MAGA feelings, which is, hey, we got elected by helping people who were in the working class and helping people who were kind of forgotten by the Republican Party. And now that we're in power, it seems like we're forgetting them again. So they're really trying to hold their feet to the fire. And I think this comes through with Medicaid cuts, especially in places where that's really propping up the Medicare, the medical system.
Right, and that's the thing. Again, it's not just if Marjorie Taylor Greene's constituents are on Medicaid or not. It's not just if a Republican in upstate New York's constituents are all on Medicaid. The hospitals are overwhelmingly dependent on that funding, and that funding's been slashed. So you have I know this works. You have hospital administrators calling you up, going, "Hey, can you come into my office? I need to show you what we're going to have to close down if these cuts go through." And suddenly you see that your constituents are going to get substandard health care because there are some people that are, trying to make this point. But
What's the money being used for?
And the money's being used, of course, here. Money's used what Bill Clinton did to us in 95 and 90s.
Just to interject, I believe it was in 2022, it may have been the Vodka Wars episodes, maybe the series after Vodka Wars, which I don't recall what the name was. But I did a video about this very subject. Rural hospitals, community hospitals were underwater in terms of their finances pre-COVID. So in 2018, 2017, going all the way back to even let's say 2010, all right? So these community hospitals have been having financial problems, and private equity companies have been coming in and buying them. Then all of a sudden, the COVID era happens. There are lots of funds that were pumped into the system by the federal government to support these community hospitals. And since COVID's done, that whole crisis, the crisis years have passed. The funding has dried up. So they're back to the same problem that they were in the pre-COVID era. That is, the community hospitals cost too much to run. There's not enough specialties that are within the community hospitals to really fund the operation. In richer environments, in richer communities, you have specialties like orthopedic surgeries or higher level of cardiac care. All right, and these specialties can charge a lot, and they get reimbursed a decent amount with good health care. Well, if you're in a richer environment, if you have a more economically viable community, you have people that have better health care. And therefore, these hospitals will be able to be more of a revenue generating enterprise. These community hospitals don't have that. They don't have the specialties. They're more focused on the middle of the road care, emergency care, right? Middle of the road care, but not high level specialty care. Regular visits and emergency breaking a leg or having a heart attack or whatever, right? So the point here is that the problems with the community hospitals have not been solved since the COVID era. If anything, the COVID era actually made it worse because they became dependent on, these community hospitals, dependent on the COVID money that was coming from the federal government. Well, that's gone. And they have poor performing, in terms of revenue, poor performing hospitals that are being bought out by private equity. Private equity is coming in. They see it as, this is a distressed asset. They can buy it, change the structure a little bit, make it more efficient with a bunch of bean counters, and then they do that around the whole state. And then they build a conglomerate. They build these community hospitals that are all tied to the private equity. And the private equity is getting cash flow from Medicare, Medicaid. The private equity has put in money into the system, and they're hoping to be able to somehow securitize this so they will make a larger profit through the securitization. So there's a big problem with these community hospitals not having the specialties, because the specialists aren't going to go to an environment that no one can afford that specialty. And two, these community hospitals cost so much to run and so dependent on Medicare and Medicaid for a lot of their patients that they're targets by private equity. And so it's not good for the community, nor for the outcomes of the patients. Now, in this case, we're talking about cutting of Medicare and Medicaid. It's going to be an additional stress on these community hospitals. This problem was way before COVID, but the COVID era kind of boosted them up a little bit with the money that was coming in. And now it's all dried up, and there's problems with Medicare and Medicaid funding. There's an overuse of it with illegal immigrants, and the system's breaking. Can't afford it. And so I would not be surprised that more community hospitals get bought out by private equity, and I would not be surprised that private equity starts closing some community hospitals because they're not profitable. See, if they're not profitable without the private equity, why are they going to be profitable with the private equity? See, the private equity is like, okay, they may have some assets, this hospital, land, or whatever. They may have some assets, but they are bad on the balance. They're bad on the income statement, but maybe they're decent on the balance sheet. So the private equity comes in, buys, injects cash into the company, and then the hospital ends up taking some loans out. And those loans, for a little while, are able to be paid by the cash flows that are coming in to the hospital through the Medicare and Medicaid. But the private equity company knows that they're going to have to cut staff, lower their wage. So that means they're paying less for doctors, less for nurses. So the quality of care starts to go down. The private equity company goes, okay, we put in, let's say, $100 million. They took a loan out for $500 million to improve the hospital. The hospital's paying the loan of that $500 million. But part of that $500 million is actually going to pay back the private equity, so that there's only $400 million left because they paid $100 million, And because because of restructuring and showing some profitability, they start issuing profitability checks to the private equity firm that bought it and their shareholders. So now that $500 million loan, $100 million went back to pay the private equity. So now the private equity doesn't have any skin in the game because they've been paid by a loan. And then maybe they skim off another 50 million. So now there's only 350 million of money that was borrowed, even though it was 500 million, that is to help restructure the company. You play this out for 5 years or so, and what happens is that the community hospital will go bankrupt. Private equity didn't care because from their perspective, just with this simple example, they got their money back and they made money. And they don't care about the hospital. That's the problem that's going on in these communities. This was starting to happen before COVID, but this is going to speed up. And then you add in the problems with the shutdown and the insolvency of Medicare and Medicaid. It's a big problem. But I said this was going to happen back in 2022. I had the whiteboard. This was during the whiteboard years. And I had the whiteboard and I was drawing it up on what was going to happen to the hospitals. It was playing out right now.
The money's being used for tax cuts for the rich. And yeah, it's not there's not a stronger argument I can think of in American politics than they're slashing your children and your parents' health care to pay for tax cuts for the rich, for Elon Musk and for the richest billionaires in Silicon Valley. I just want to circle back really quickly because we've been talking about this some, but I don't think people are paying attention to it enough. Yes, of course, we're talking about public health care. We're talking about Medicaid and Medicare. But what you touched on, I want to touch on again. Private health care insurance is exploding. Not only is it exploding, people are feeling it. There's a real crisis out there. You know, we always talked about how in Canada, we don't want nationalized health care because it takes 6 months to get the doctor or the procedure you want. That's now happening in some cases with private health care, where they'll deny, they'll finally approve, and then they'll come back with a denial letter, and you just keep going around in circles to try to get to see the doctor you want to go see. Private health care insurance, the exploding cost of it, along with Medicaid, Medicare, these other issues, those are going to combine for a toxic mix on the campaign trail in the coming months and years, aren't they?
Yeah, and again, it goes back to what you were talking about, experience and competence, right? We have this bloated, complicated, way too expensive healthcare system that is really one of the most bureaucratic, almost unexplainable systems and feels unfixable. Well, the only way you fix it is actually having people who have authentic expertise who take this and try to figure out, like, how
And
do
who do we have? We have RFK Jr.
It can't be fixed. It's only going to get worse. And this is why I keep on saying it's super important to take care of your health. Because if you get on pharmacopoeia because of poor lifestyle, you're going to spend more and you're going to have less vitality, less longevity. Most people, they don't pay attention. They think that, they can kick the can down the road or they'll be okay. And eventually it gets too expensive. The only way to squeeze out the cost of healthcare is to have a society that is much healthier. You have less cardiovascular disease, less cancers, less dementia, less diabetes. Now, of course, there's going to be some diseases that are not lifestyle related. But most of the problem, most of the cost in the United States is because of poor lifestyle decisions. So that's the answer. The answer isn't bureaucracy. The answer is tell your constituents, tell the population, look in the mirror and say it's your fault. Everybody's is at fault with higher health care. It's not the insurance company's fault. It's not the doctor's fault. It's not the medical school's fault. It's not the government's fault. It's the individual and the amalgamation of all these decisions within the society of the individual. That collective result ends up having higher costs of healthcare because of poor lifestyle choices. If you pay attention to your health, if you actually look at it from a holistic point of view, that watch your diet, detoxify your body, get proper sleep, take proper supplementation, do different types of exercises and stretching and balancing, mindfulness, learning new things, being more positive, having some sort of spirituality or mindfulness in your life. These are huge ways to improve your life and lower the cost of your individual health care. But when you have a majority of the population that's not paying attention to their lifestyle choices and they start getting diabetes and heart disease. Most people don't even know this, but your heart disease starts when you're 15 or 16 years old. 15 or 16 years old, you start cardiovascular disease. It's asymptomatic. It doesn't start popping up until about age 30, but it's there 100%. So that means that majority, 60% of the kids out there at age 15 already have cardiovascular disease. Now take a look at what they're eating. And now you'll understand why it's happening. So the answer isn't bureaucrats like Joe, Morning Joe and Mika. The answer isn't in Congress. The answer isn't even with your health care. The answer is looking in the mirror and saying, you need to take ownership of your life. Because if you don't, you will be paying for it.
On vaccines. Hey, that's who we have, Jim. I'm sorry, go ahead. But instead of having an expert that can sort through this to drive down prices, we have RFK Jr. there at HHS.
Right, and like aspirationally, there's so many components of the MAHA movement that make a ton of sense. People should live healthier.
Yeah, exactly. But here's the problem. You got a bunch of bureaucrats that think, oh, the experts, they're going to be able to help us. No, they're part of the problem. The experts, the physicians, they're going to make a decision on how to cut the cost of healthcare. Yet they know what side their bread is buttered. They know how they're getting reimbursed. Do you think that they're going to tell healthcare that the insurance companies to reduce their compensation? Of course not. So you really want the experts in the room? The insurance company wants you to have higher premiums, higher deductibles. The doctors want higher reimbursement rates from the insurance company. Now, neither one of those experts are actually on the side of the patient. Now, I'll just let that sink in. And if you dive into the why, you will start to realize that what I am saying makes a lot of sense. And the only way that you're going to be able to bring down your healthcare costs is for you to be healthier. And in most cases, it's because of lifestyle.
In their food, but you also have a very sick population. Just look at the numbers. It is what it is. And I've experienced it. My wife has had a lot of different health issues, and we have all of the benefits. We have Blue Cross Blue Shield. We know doctors. We can do whatever we want. And it's still a terrible system. It's still a terribly inefficient system. So that poor person who's on Medicaid, who only has one hospital to go to, it's not just, it's a political topic. It's their damn life, right? It's whether or not they can get the medicine that they need, whether they can get the treatment that they need. If they can't get to the hospital, it's not close enough, they might not go at all. They don't go, they die. And that's why competence matters, and thinking about these topics and the complexity of it matters. And so this is another political fireworks show. It'll be resolved like every other shutdown has in the past. But I think the reality of the healthcare system is really coming into full focus. And it comes into full focus when you don't get something you need, or what you need costs a hell of a lot more than you can afford.
Well, even after this is resolved, healthcare is going to remain a massive, growing crisis.
Yes.
Yeah.
Axios co-founder and CEO Jim Vandehei.
You can't look at this disparately. You got to look at the big picture here. We are $37 trillion in debt, and we have $2 trillion in the deficit annually. All right, so we have $37 trillion in debt, and our revenues coming in versus what we spend annually is $2 trillion. That's a lot of money. And so the only way to fix this problem isn't just to have more bureaucracy and try to trim the costs at the margin. They need to cut Medicare, they need to cut Medicaid, and they need to cut Social Security. Now, you can't just cut it 100% right now because people are dependent on it. This is why you have to do it based on a tiered tranche system. If you're already in the system, if you're already retired or already in dependent on Medicare or Medicaid because of an injury or whatnot, then you still get it. If you're a veteran, you 100% get your health care covered, no matter what tranche you're in. I think veterans should always get their health care covered 100%. Now, if you are already retired, you keep your benefits with a COLA adjustment. If you are 5 years about ready to retire, you get your benefits with your COLA adjustment. If you're in the tranche that is going to be retiring, let's say in 6 to 10 years, you get less benefits, but you'll get some benefits, maybe 80% or 85%. Let's just 80%. And then if you are in the 11 to 15 years from retirement, maybe you only get 60% of your benefits, 60% of your Social Security. And as you go down the line here, you'll get to a generation that gets nothing. And that way we can slowly get off of the dependency of the government. And you can be saving more. And when you do that, you'll start to notice that healthcare costs will start to go down. See, if you take a look at a chart, when there is a requirement for healthcare or requirement for insurance, like car insurance, then all of a sudden car insurance starts to go up. And it accelerates the costs. So what you have to do is get to a point where you make it that it's not required. And once that happens, then the demand is less. And the insurance companies still want those premiums, so they're going to realize they need to cut down those premiums to be able to have that incentive. So this government monstrosity that they've created has been a signal to the insurance companies to raise premiums, not lower premiums. Because we're being told if you have more people in the system, in the pool, you'll be able to bring down the costs. But has that really happened? No. Why don't you do reverse logic and just be a contrarian and go, well, what if we actually reduce the pool? What would the insurance companies do? And I'm willing to bet that the insurance companies, because they need the premiums to maintain their shareholder, that maintain those shareholders and the PE ratio, the price to earnings ratio. If their earnings go down, that means their price of their stock goes down. And so they're going to realize, well, wait a minute, we're going to need to lower premiums so we can get more customers. And therefore the revenues come back up. So don't believe this bullshit that it's, oh, the pool. If the masses moved away and stopped paying for their insurance would go down for sure. And then the hospitals will start to realize, well, wait a minute, most people don't have insurance, or a lot of people don't have insurance. They're not paying for their insurance. They're getting healthier. And so what will happen is that these hospitals will have to restructure their organizations and start cutting costs. But if you have a government that keeps on doling out money for insurance, there's no incentive for the hospitals to radically cut their costs, where doctors radically cut their fees, their fee structure. And this will diffuse even into the cost of medical school. Medical school will go down, not up. The only reason why all this is happening is because the government is involved. The government keeps on issuing loans for students. Well, the schools can just keep on jacking up the tuition. If the government capped it at a certain rate, they wouldn't be able to do that. If the government reduced the amount of loans that are going to medical students, then the medical schools will have to lower their rates. The same issue with the insurance companies. So it's going to take a long time to do this, if ever, because you have the Democratic Party that says just give me, which just leads to more debt and more inflation, and you have the Republicans that are saying, well, we want to cut these programs, but there's another part of this: cut the Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid through a titration method, through a tranche method. The other side of the coin is that the uber wealthy will have to be heavily taxed to 75% of their income. Uber wealthy, I'm talking billionaires, where 75% of your income, boom, gone, goes to the government. Why? Because they have too much money and they actually tip the scale for their benefit through K Street. The more money you take away from them, the less power they have. That's the right way to fix this. You have people that are very powerful that use K Street for their benefit, like insurance companies, or see if wealthy individuals weren't tipping the balance, then we'd have a more fair society. We actually would have a control of our inflation. And people have to start realizing you can't keep a $37 trillion growing debt and assume your society isn't going to collapse. And people are going to have make hard choices. And those choices are no Medicare, no Medicaid, and no Social Security for a certain generation. And that in the intermediate generations, they get less and less care. They get less and less social benefits. But that's the only way to fix this. You can't just keep on going. So people will say they'll use an emotional fallacy. Well, that means that grandma is going to die. We may lose our country if we keep on staying the course of this indebtedness. Now, what's more important for the country? What's more important for maintaining the Constitution? What's more important to maintaining our country into the future, into the next 150 years? Is that more important, or is the life or death of grandma? See, this goes to the core of the problem. It's egoism. No one's life is more important than the Constitution. No one's life is more important than making sure that we have a better and strong government and society to be able to benefit future generations. No one's more important than that. I'm not, you're not. So we're going to have to bite the bullet here. It's really important that people need to start realizing that Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid are going to have to be eliminated, but slowly. As we grow our economy and people start saving more, and the younger you are, the more you can save. Oh, we can't, you know, people aren't getting paid. People aren't getting into the workforce when they're young, so this isn't going to work. What's the other solution? Keep the young in some sort of social program that leads to the destruction of our country? It's going to get to a point where people are going to have to find ways to be plugged into the economy and not be so reliant on government aid. It's individualism in this regard. But it's also the realization that we need to make the system stronger for future generations. And the system doesn't get stronger in future generations by piling on debt. It's actually reducing the debt that makes the future generation better off. Now, the sad thing is that the future generation won't even care. They won't even really be thankful of it. I mean, case in point, look at how many people, even in your home, in your household, actually think about the sacrifice of individuals, let's say during World War II, the soldiers in World War II, or any war in the United States, for the United States. You really think about that? Are you really thankful? There are some memorial plaques that are on the campus of Harvard and in the clubs of Harvard, especially for World War I and World War II. And they have a lot of Harvard students and alumni served and died in war. Most of the new students don't even think about it. They don't even look at the plaque because it's not part of their little world. Yet it was through their sacrifice that we have a country. And that's the sad part of this, is that when you come to the realization that your life isn't as important as the Constitution, when your life is not as important as making sure that this country has another 150 years of peace and prosperity, the sad thing is that future generations won't be thankful. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Be prepared for the fall and the winter season. Something's coming. You know what it is. Cases are going up. Wastewater surveillance is proving my point. This fall and winter is going to be problematic. You need to mitigate. I have structural nanosilver toothpaste that will whiten your teeth, freshen your breath. It will help with inflammation at the gum line and improve your gum line health. But also it'll help to neutralize. Super important for the fall and winter. Get a few tubes of this toothpaste, very high quality, has no fluoride. It's made from structural nanosilver. Please go to my store and get the very high quality toothpaste. Another great thing to use during the fall and the winter, but this is something that I do every day as part of my anti-aging protocol, is taking the Max 35, which is 35 parts per million, or Cleanse, which is 30 parts per million. You take them the same way. Teaspoon a day, swish in your mouth, and gargle 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and then swallow it. What will happen is that you're improving the health of your oral cavity and your oral pharynx, which is in the back of your throat. You're maintaining mucosal barrier and helping the health of your epithelial cells. That's super important. This fall and winter, by having a more robust immune system and improving the health of the epithelial lining, you're going to be able to weather the storm that's coming. Right? Take a teaspoon a day every day. If you're not feeling well, take a tablespoon or two a day. Or if someone around you is not feeling well, let's say a family member or a coworker, take a tablespoon or two a day. Swish in your mouth, gargle 20 seconds or 30 seconds, and then swallow it. Again, that will boost up that immune system. Prepare yourself for the fall and the winter. You want to boost up that immune system beforehand. And if you potentially are exposed to something or you're concerned, then just up the dosage to a tablespoon or two a day. And then go back to your maintenance dose when everything's all clear. I take Max 35 or Cleanse every day. And I've been doing that for over 5 years. Teaspoon a day. If I'm not feeling well, I'll take a tablespoon or two. Now, go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Be prepared for the fall and the winter season. And a great way to do that is to get the toothpaste and get the Max 35 Cleanse. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. All right. All right, I want to play this MSNBC News clip.
AI. This is the first.
All right, so there's a lot going on in the world here. There's a lot going on. Government shutdown, we mentioned tariffs and everything else. But the VIX has really been kind of muted. It's been muted like well below the highs of earlier this year when we first got those tariff announcements. So I want to ask you, in the options market, isn't just the play to own the VIX, whether it's calls or puts or inverse? I mean, isn't that the place to be? Because what are the chances the volatility stays the same going forward?
It's such a great question, Frank. And, you know, I think for a cohort of people that is the answer. But unfortunately, and I've brought this analogy back before, that the market's been a little bit like a paddling duck, meaning that duck looks calm and smooth on the surface, but those little duck feet have been violently paddling underneath. And essentially what is happening is there are moves under the surface, but they've had this effect of canceling each other out. So when you feed back into the VIX, you don't see it as much. But, you know, as we continue to climb to highs and we keep getting less and less data, there's a lot of angst that I would say is also riding under that surface.
All right, so let's just kind of pull on this thread about VIX options right now. Do you pay more for the upside, the downside, the inverse? I mean, where do you have to pay more? Where's the money going?
So it's really interesting. I'd say historically, if you look back 20, 30 years, it's always the downside, right? Because people are long the stock market, and what they want is insurance. They want to hedge their portfolios. I'd say a post-COVID phenomenon, Frank, is this idea that the right tail, so the upside, is what people are really concerned about, because they're much more concerned about, you know, AMD coming out with news or OpenAI coming out with news and something ripping that they are not participating in. So the FOMO has really got people. You actually have much more concern about folks missing out than they have about the market trading down. And so we've seen a lot more call options trade in things like NASDAQ or S&P or on individual stocks as well.
All right. What individual stocks, though? I mean, we're seeing the options action. Is investors trying to play the upside on some of these AI names, or actually thinking that there may be, you know, a bit of a top happening here? We just heard from Paul Tudor Jones yesterday, kind of worrying about just this market and the rally and kind of what do you call it, blow off?
Yeah, so I would say, especially, we're a little far out in terms of tech earnings, so that doesn't happen quite yet. It's going to be financials first. But what we've seen in previous quarters is when you look at the Mag 7 and AI tech names, they start to get really inverted from a call perspective. All that means is people are really bidding up those call options. Again, they don't want to have the FOMO. They don't want to miss out when these are such heavy concentration names in the benchmark. We're not seeing that yet. We're also not seeing, you know, demand for downside, but I would expect that to pick up as we get closer to their actual earnings date.
All right. What do you see when it comes to financials? And does the shutdown have an impact, at least for the options market, when it comes to financials and how investors view it?
So far, I think we're about a week into the shutdown. You haven't seen pricing tick up yet. either in financials or on the broader market. Now, I would expect this to change. So right now, the options market is pricing that we will get some sort of resolution before the Fed has to have its next meeting. If we're not going to see that, Frank, I do expect you're going to get that big headline number higher. I do expect that people are going to start reaching for protection because now, talk about flying blind, it's going to be a few more days of that. Financials, typically, when you look at proxy ETFs like KRE or XLF, it's a good time to own that volatility either through calls or puts, because that tends to be when the most idiosyncratic single stock volatility occurs.
All right, let's see here. Let's take a look at what General Keane said about Trump.
So President Trump yesterday saying a deal to release the remaining hostages.
We had some very good meetings. The countries of the world, a lot of the countries surrounding Israel, frankly, Muslim, Arab, and many others have had great meetings with Hamas. And it looks like it's working. So we'll wait for a little while, see how it all turns out.
Will the administration begin firing?
It'll work very, very quickly. I think it's going to go very quickly. The meetings seem to be very good. We'll find out. We'll let you know soon.
Okay, so that was President Trump yesterday. So this is regarding the deal that remains on the table to release the remaining hostages and the war in Gaza. It could be close or it could not. There are indirect talks in Egypt today after Trump's initial deadline for the hostage release passed last night. The president warning of, quote, massive bloodshed if a deal is not reached soon. General Jack Keane is here for us, and we need you to help sort this out for us. Do you think Hamas will take the deal and release all the hostages at once?
Well, I know a couple things. I think they're going to delay the release of the hostages and use all sorts of excuses for doing that. And I think they're going to hold over the release of the hostages. Ahead of that, their position is they don't want to disarm. They're implying they're willing to give up control. But I think if they can keep their weapons, that enables them to maintain some kind of control going down the road in the future. So everybody has reservations here. And certainly the Israelis have the concerns that we just discussed. Hamas doesn't think the Israelis are going to really pull away from Gaza City and go to the border of Israel. And obviously the Arabs have always wanted some definition here of a Palestinian state. There's a pathway to it, but not a definition of one in the deal. And they also wanted some representation from the Palestinian Authority. It's not in the deal, but Palestinians are in it in terms of the oversight committee. Yes. The other thing that's operating here and makes it feel good, I really believe all the participants, to include political leaders of Hamas, maybe less so with the Hamas fighting forces themselves, that if we don't do it now, it's likely not going to get done. Yeah. And we're just going to return to the war that's been going on now, for almost 2 years. So that, I think, is a sensing that the Arabs have, the Qataris have that sensing, the political masters of Hamas have that, the fighters themselves possibly not. And so I think the Israelis are there as well. And the President of the United States has stitched this thing together. Listen, we got to give him a huge amount of credit. The behind-the-scenes work with him and his team and all the parties here has been really quite extraordinary. They'll get out eventually in terms of the details, the arguing back and forth, the compromises that have been made to get us to this position. And we're as close as we have ever been. And we'll just see if we can get across the finish line here in the next few days.
It is interesting how silent the ceasefire now crowd has been since President Trump put this on the table. That ceasefire could happen if Hamas would take the deal. And can I ask you about one other topic? That's the other big topic we always seem to come back to you on, and that's Russia and Ukraine. Russia's not letting up on these airstrikes, and Zelensky was on air over the weekend.
Russia has rejected every proposal to end the war or even to halt the strikes. It is blatantly trying to destroy our civilian infrastructure, especially now ahead of winter. Gas facilities, power plants, and transmission systems. Zero real reaction from the world.
Where are we in this conflict, we as collectively?
Yeah, well, Russia's strategic objectives have not changed. certainly to take control of Ukraine, expand into Eastern Europe. And to date, nothing has persuaded Putin that his war strategy to accomplish those objectives are not being met. In other words, he feels comfortable that continuing the war is still the best option for him. And nothing we have done has changed his mind. And indeed, what has happened right in front of our eyes, he's escalated the war. He's escalated the war in terms of the bombing campaign against civilians and civilian infrastructure, energy infrastructure, principally with winter coming. And he's also penetrated into Eastern European countries that certainly undermine the alliance itself, force them to look more at their internal security than helping Ukraine, and just put in doubt the whole circumstance that Russia has imposed on Europe. So yes, I mean, Putin is steady, he's deliberate, he's ruthless to be sure, but he's not reckless. These are deliberate, methodical moves that he is making to undermine the United States' will and resolve and undermine the Europeans' will and resolve. That's what he is really about here. And we've got to stay focused on it. We've got to outgun the Ukrainians militarily, and some of those decisions have been made last week, and that's all good. We can't get into the specifics of that. And I still think we got to foreclose on the sanctions and the tariff, slap them hard in terms of anybody that's purchasing oil, certainly from the Russians. That obviously is China, it's Iran, it's a whole bunch of other countries they're helping to finance this and arm them for sure. But the reality is we have got to get tougher militarily and also economically to put real pressure on Russia. We don't know if that would get him to the negotiating table either. But this much we do know. The current path is not getting there. He is staying on his war fighting path because he thinks it's the best option to achieve his objectives. He thinks eventually Zelensky will cave in and make major concessions, and it will undermine the resolve and the will of the West as well. That's what he is about here. We've got to recognize it, that strategy that he's got, and we got to try to take it away from him with more pressure.
General Jack Kane with the wise words of the morning. Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern.
All right, we're going to play a clip from Times Radio about France and its instability. Now, in terms of the Gaza peace agreement, there's a low probability that it'll happen. All right, because of the 20-point plan. I don't see on how the Palestinians, Hamas, are going to agree to the whole 20-point plan. Also, the Israelis are. Netanyahu's government seems to be slow walking this. So even if it is agreed, it probably will be a false peace. So you have I see two options here. There are two highly probable options and a third option. The first option is that there's a peace agreement that actually holds. I think that's very low probability. Then there's the probability that there is an agreement, but it's half-hearted, and that half-hearted agreement will lead to a further conflict later this year or into next year. Let me rephrase that. Later into next year, all right? I'm concerned that in September 11th of 2026 is when the shofar is not blown for Rosh Hashanah. That's another issue here, that there's a curse coming on the earth. So the curse isn't right now. The curse is coming a year from now, or a little less than a year from now. So if we pick a false peace, there's probably going to be more conflict, more violent, and it involve more nations around the world because we picked this path of false peace. The other option is that neither of the participants agrees, and there's no deal. I think there's 60 to 70% chance of that, and about a 30% chance of this false peace. All right. Now, I've been putting it into the context of what's going to happen in 2026 on September 11th during Rosh Hashanah when the shofar's not blown. And I keep on using that as a guide. Is there a decision that's taking place now up to that point in time, September 11th of 2026, where if we make a decision, it may make it worse. And a false peace is a worse solution. Now, most people think there's not going to be any agreement. That's probably true, 70% chance. There's a 30% chance that there's some sort of expedience because of Washington that will lead to a false peace that will lead to further worsening of the conflict in a year from now. That's the problem that I'm really concerned about. Now, that's a little metaphysical. It's not, it's not using it in these typical geopolitical lens. It's more of a metaphysical lens, but I'm concerned about it. And I mentioned it during my show with John Hogue. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the digestive enzyme complex. This will help you to break up your proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids, reduce the stress on your pancreas, allow you to absorb your nutrients, and that will help with your metabolism and your digestion. It's really important to take a digestive enzyme complex to help with your pancreatic health, especially if you're 40 years of age or older. Even if you're healthy, your pancreas doesn't perform as well. So it's important to take the digestive enzyme complex and help with your pancreatic health. Now, it also has bromelain in it, and bromelain is an enzyme that helps to break up clots. In addition, the proteolytic enzymes here will help to break up glycoproteins. And this is the reason why I said you should be taking the digestive enzyme complex, not just for your pancreatic health and for digestion, but also to weather the storm, let's say for the fall and winter season, because it'll help to break up clots and break up glycoproteins. And I've been saying this and recommending this during the 2020 crisis. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the digestive enzyme complex. It's dual purpose. Help with your pancreatic health and take it during the fall and winter season. NAD Plus is a supplement that will boost up your NAD Plus levels, increase your energy, help to repair your DNA, including your mitochondrial DNA. So your cellular DNA and your mitochondrial DNA will improve. And NAD Plus will help to protect your neurons. This is super important to take if you're 40 years of age or older. And ubiquinol. Ubiquinol is the most bioavailable form of CoQ10. Ubiquinol will soak up free radicals because it's an antioxidant. It's going to help with the health of the mitochondria to boost up your energy levels so you have more ATP, and ubiquinol will protect your neurons. So a neurostack, a powerful neurostack, is to take the ubiquinol and the NAD+. And an added benefit of this stack is that you're helping with your pancreatic health. So you're helping with your digestion, your pancreatic health. You're preparing for the fall and the winter season. Believe me, that's going to be problematic. And you're protecting your neurons, boosting up your energy levels, and repairing your DNA damage. And you're going to need to repair your DNA damage because of this fall and winter. Trust me. So here's a great stack for that. Now, if you start paying attention to what I have to say, you're gonna weather the fall and winter much better. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order.
Incapable of fulfilling the needs for stability here in France. So I believe that pretty much not, I'm not going to say anyone, but any qualified person that would assume the role, but that after a consultation with the parliament would have a better result.
And let's head to France, where Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu has quit after just 26 days in office. He succeeded François Bayrou, whose government fell when MPs rejected his budget, but faced immediate backlash over a near identical cabinet and mounting threats of a no-confidence vote. Just a little earlier this evening, I spoke to Eleanor Carriot. She's an MP in President Macron's Renaissance Party, and she gave me her reaction to Sébastien Lecornu's resignation.
It is more the result of the current crisis, which is also the result of a very divided National Assembly and France's learning curve as it goes from a very presidential regime to a more parliamentarian one. So it is worrisome, and it is a new episode in this mindset change. But I do believe there is a way to build a government, a coalition, and adopt a budget.
I mean, this is the third Prime Minister to resign after serving just a few months. When you say that you think that there is a way ahead, I mean, what is that? Who could actually pull together a government given the divided nature of the Assembly?
So the story is
this is important. This is important. The instability, what's going on in France and in England. Oh, why? Oh, it's just the politics and it doesn't really matter in the United States. No, it does, because it's related to the central banks. And this instability is caused by too much debt and the division between the have and the have-nots. So you have this doom loop because of the indebtedness and this instability, where you don't even have a functioning government anymore. On top of the Eastern Front in Ukraine with Russia. And you have central banks wanting to do quantitative tightening. Well, you can't do quantitative tightening if you have a war in the East, on the Eastern Front, and you have political instability in two major countries like France and England. This is a major problem. This is a major problem. Now, the United States is faring much better. We are, in relative terms, more stable financially and politically and militarily. But France and England are not. And why do we assume that this is not going to cause a contagion? Why do we assume that this won't cause an issue globally? Either through additional war, through the activation of Article 5, or have central banks not do their quantitative tightening and lead to additional inflation around the world. See, people keep on saying, oh, the inflation is so bad in the United States. You got to pay attention here. It's happening all over the world. Oh, it's the tariffs. No, it's not the tariffs. This was happening under Biden's administration. Why? Because government spent too much damn money and had a monetary easing policy during COVID. That's why. And we were still in the aftershock of Lehman in 2020. We were still feeling the aftershock of the central banks putting so much on their balance sheet as they were trying to do quantitative tightening. So people say, oh, that Lehman is a distant memory. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's still affecting central bank policy. On top of what happened with COVID, it would have been better off to not do the additional stimulus and let certain companies and certain industries and certain just die off, than to have this perniciousness of inflation that will never go back to pre-COVID levels. They'll never, ever, ever, ever. Your price levels will never go back to pre-COVID levels. The only thing that will happen is that your inflation percentage will go back to normal. But your actual absolute price level, they'll never go back to pre-2019. But you got a bunch of fucking liberals out there that wanted just more money. Just dole it out. And they don't even realize that because of those policies, you are now having problems like this that most likely will lead to world war.
Had a prime minister that was appointed and was censored by the National Assembly in a gesture that was rather unique, whereas the far right voted with the far left and all the oppositions after a budgetary discussion. That was the first one, Michel Barnier. Then you had another surprise, another unexpected event. It is the second appointed prime minister, François Bayrou, who decided to call for a confidence vote when he didn't have a majority at the National Assembly. And now there's a resignation. So it's actually been different steps, different learning processes. And I think that the main issue here is we have a government that is appointed by the president and by the president only without having to consult the parliament. And I think this has to change. It's proven incapable of fulfilling the needs for stability here in France. So I believe that pretty much, I'm not going to say anyone, but any qualified person that would assume the role, but that after a consultation with the parliament would have a better result. I really liked Sébastien Lecornu. I just think the process and the methodology was not the one we needed in the very divided assembly.
Well, underlying this, of course, is the fact that President Macron called the elections when he didn't need to a year or so ago, and he doesn't have a majority. So, I mean, what can change in the process that can help him to resolve this?
Well, what happened though is he felt that he needed to go for the elections because the opposition had been extremely difficult to work with, opposing to pretty much everything. And I'll give you a simple example. The right opposed to the pension reform, which is something that the right had historically been asking for. So it was a difficult time in 2024 when the snap elections were called. I obviously did not think that they were absolutely necessary, but this is the past, and we have to stop looking at the past. I think right now what needs to change, what must change absolutely, is having MPs building a coalition and accepting that there's some things in their programs that will be adopted and others that will be dismissed. But until today, you have here in France MPs say, well, I want to be in power and I want to apply my program, but they don't have a majority. I mean, maybe we have to go and travel more through Europe and see how it works in other countries. And, that will help actually understand this need for coalition building and for compromise.
Well, as you say, there doesn't seem to be much scope for compromise, and certainly Marine Le Pen's party are saying that the time has come that President Macron should call new presidential elections. I mean, since he seems to be overseeing all of this, do you think he should now call presidential elections?
You're absolutely right. That's what they're doing. They're trying to push him to present his resignation or to be dismissed. And I honestly do not believe that this will bring more stability to France. And I honestly do not believe that this would actually reassure the markets, nor that the result of this election called for an urgency without due preparation would result in anything good for a country. I don't believe Marine Le Pen would win. Actually, she wouldn't even be able to present herself. Maybe her party would win. That would be a disaster, in my opinion. I disagree with all of their program. And you know what? They keep changing their ideas. They were for Brexit. Now they say that they want to stay in the European Union, but that they...
See, they're already having problems. Where do they want to stay in the European Union or do they want to exit out and follow the course of Britain? And Britain's having problems either way. They had problems being in Brexit, and they're having problems being... They had problems being in the European Union, and they had problems being out of the European Union. But France is starting to think the same thing. Why? Oh, well, wait. Maybe they want to be able to control their currency. So we're actually seeing if you have two countries like this, and Germany is also starting to become indebted. When you have three countries that have indebtedness and a looming war in the region, it's a sign that the European Union is actually the whole experiment of the European Union has failed. And so this is going to cause financial turmoil that will most likely cause a worldwide contagion with the banking system. Now, in the long run, this will be beneficial to the United States because we're relatively stable compared to the craziness that's happening in Europe. So would you want to put your money in an environment that is less stable? Of course not. So where's the money going to go? It's going to go to China, and it's going to go to the United States, not to Europe. Especially when you have these doom loops that are happening with France and the UK and potentially with Germany.
Before that, they were more for workers. They're really difficult to read because they're very opportunistic. And I think the desires of a political party should not dictate the calendar or the agenda of a country, in particular, as you mentioned it before, in times where we're facing a massive economic crisis.
Does your party then have to drop huge planks of its policy agenda if it's going to win the support perhaps from a coalition on the left or perhaps from a coalition on the right?
It will, and it's actually shown that it's capable of doing so and that it's willing to work with virtually everyone. I'll give you an example. We are not in favor of tax raise. We are already a very high, a country where taxes are really, really high, and we're always opposed to new taxes. We've actually suppressed many of those. And the left believes that we need more money coming into the state and that we need to increase taxes. Well, we accepted that as an exceptional measure for a few years. And we're totally able to speak about virtually anything. But this needs to be a compromise and a discussion that takes place at the National Assembly, not something that is imposed by a minority coalition as the left now seems to be willing to do.
Just finally, how serious do you think is the crisis facing France and its political system? Because, I mean, the reputation of your nation is at risk here, isn't it?
It is, and as I said, there is also the economic risk. But on the other hand, you've had similar crises in virtually all of the parliamentarian democracies. You've had Belgium without a government for more than a year. You've had Italy with the Parlamento government after several political crises. I think what matters is not how bad the crisis is how capable you are of finding solutions. And as we speak today, even though the situation is worrisome, and even though I share most of my constituents' preoccupation, I do believe there is a way, and this solution still stands here at the National Assembly, and you can count on me to do everything in my power and in my group's power to find these compromises.
Well, that was Eleanor Carriot, who's an MP in President Macron's Renaissance Party, speaking to me just a little earlier here on Times Radio.
So France is definitely a major problem, you know, and if people don't pay attention to it, it may boil over to other financial institutions that cause disruption in the markets. With that said, let's take a look at what's going on here. The S&P 500 is 6,720. VIX is trading at 16. Oil is trading at $61.56. The euro is trading at 1.16. The Japanese yen is trading at 151.05. That's very bullish. That's very bullish. Now, the Japanese yen is weakening. The dollar is strengthening. That's usually a sign of international stability. So based on that indicator and VIX being at 16, equities are going to rally. There's going to be a rally to that. And that jump in the USD yen trade is correlated to the female candidate for potentially winning the position as prime minister. So we'll see what happens there. Bitcoin is trading at 122,000, and natural gas is trading at 3.45. Oil is trading at 32.10. Now, as we move towards the end of the year, most likely natural gas is going to be trading at about 3.6. So oil will continue to go up, hopefully in the 40 range. And Bitcoin, there's been rumor that it's going to hit over 130 by year end, maybe 135. If that happens, then we should see BITO moving closer to like the 2150 mark, maybe to 22 mark. All right, with that, let's go to, it looks like the Model Y is going to be a lower cost model for Tesla. So let's listen in on that.
Find that, the vehicle has a glass roof that is incrementally more expensive than just a sort of typical roof. So you could see maybe a change there. You could see the company use a smaller battery, and anytime you sort of shrink the battery down, of course, there's going to be some sacrifice on a range perspective, but that should make the vehicle more affordable for the end consumer. So those are just a couple of ways that are pretty simple and straightforward. Maybe some sort of like lighting fixtures, things like that. Those were sort of hallmarks of what this relatively recently redesigned Model Y offered in terms of bright sort of tail lights, and the front of the vehicle kind of looks like the Cybertruck where there's a light bar across. I think when we saw the teaser image earlier this week, it was two headlights, and so that could be an indication of a way in which they've sort of taken some costs out of the vehicle.
Craig, as we think about spurring the next round or next wave of EV demand, how much is price a driver there versus, say, lack of a really good charging network, or maybe people just don't really want EVs? How much is Tesla said, boy, if we lower the price, we're going to really spur demand?
Yeah, I mean, I think to Tesla's credit, they've really addressed the charging question, much more thoroughly than any other manufacturer, and they've sort of taken it upon themselves to do so. They've now sort of opened up that charging network to other manufacturers, and so you've seen, over the last year and a half, a lot of car makers, adopt Tesla's charging standard. Their sort of plug design. That has made charging less of an issue, I would say, and yet it's still, I think, something to overcome for the sort of average consumer. Even if there is more charging available, I think people are still kind of nervous, and to the extent that you haven't used an EV before, that's a hurdle to get over relative to just sticking with a gas car or taking the sort of incremental approach of going to a hybrid. But to answer your question about how much price is an issue, I think it's massive. It's a big difference in terms of what you can expect to pay for an electric vehicle versus a gas car. There's still a sort of stubborn premium that we've yet to really close, and until and unless we're able to get closer to parity, I think electric vehicles are going to have a harder time catching on in the U.S. market.
Yeah, I mean, that's one big reason why they're so popular in California, because gas prices are so high that it makes it much more economical. Craig Trudell, thank you so much. Craig Trudell is our Global Autos editor joining us from London here for Bloomberg News. Let's switch gears and take a look at some of the hardware companies, or I should say software companies. Once upon a time it was hardware.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about IBM. It's a legacy tech company, and it is the latest legacy tech company to partner up with an AI startup. Anurag Rana is tech analyst here at Bloomberg Intelligence. Anurag, we hear this fancy announcement about IBM inking a partnership with Anthropic to integrate this Claude family of large language models into certain IBM software. What I noticed is that there's no dollar amount mentioned at all. So how do you evaluate this partnership versus other tie-ups?
See, when you come to a company like IBM, I think they have done a very good job of being open and partnering with other vendors. I think the acquisition of Red Hat was the first such example a few years ago. And frankly speaking, the company has turned around quite a bit. Now it's more of a software company than it is a service or a hardware company. So when you look at today's announcements, IBM still has a lot of footprint in legacy companies and their internal infrastructure, whether that's a regulated entity, whether that's an on-premise software. What they're basically saying is, for these companies who want to add more AI capabilities into their infrastructure, we're going to use one of the best models that's out there, and that's Anthropic. They're not, just solely dependent on IBM's own internal models, but we see more and more of that happening. That companies like IBM and other services companies will go out and partner with, Anthropic, with OpenAI, with Gemini, and give more enterprise capabilities to vendors or to companies, basically.
How does Anthropic differ from OpenAI, if at all?
That's a very good question, Paul. And right now, what we're seeing is Anthropic is pushing more and more stuff on the corporate side or the enterprise side. On OpenAI side, their core business is still ChatGPT, which is the app, and that's more of a consumer app right now. And the question is, which one of the models will somebody use? Whether if you are, let's say, a JP Morgan or a Citicorp, will you be going to be using one of their models or an open source model? I think they're going to be using all of the models. What Anthropic relationship with IBM does, it actually helps them to spread the word out across their entire customer base. So if you are trying to get more coding done, for example, in an IT department, and you have all the legacy products that there, now you can use an AI model from Anthropic rather than using whatever tools you had before.
Okay, so it makes sense why Anthropic is a good fit for IBM, or how it's going to incorporate Anthropic into its software. But what does IBM specifically offer Anthropic? What access does IBM have that Anthropic wants and needs?
Yeah, that's another excellent question. In this case, you're looking at IBM's entire customer base. IBM has a very large services business for IBM Consulting. These consultants will go out and sell Anthropic software into the enterprises and say, hey, bank, let me help you to automate this particular process, and you can use it with this software. It drives their consulting business, and it also helps out their software business, which is fairly popular right now.
IBM hitting all-time high here today, Anurag. This stock has found a new life, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that we've been saying it for almost 5 years now. The acquisition of Red Hat completely changed it. If you go back and look at some of the comments we've made on TV about IBM prior to Red Hat, it was a very closed company. It really wanted to sell their own products to people and was not very keen on embracing what I would say is open source. With the acquisition of Red Hat, and the company saying, Red Hat can work with any cloud provider. I think that was the biggest difference to me, was it allowed Red Hat to work with companies, but based on Amazon Web Services or Microsoft. So they were not just pushing their own cloud products. And I think that really made a difference. Their software business has been doing so well comparatively to the rest of the world. And I think that's where you see the market validation that this is the right strategy for them.
All right, Anurag Rana, a pleasure as always. Tech analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence, always making us smarter and giving us some context to these much needed headlines, because it feels like every week there's some kind of old school tech company announcing some kind of deal with an AR startup, and it's not very clear how much money is involved, except that it's going to be a great growth driver.
Yes, exactly. Whether it's IBM, Oracle, Intel, these names that, again, we've kind of considered old, they're back, baby. All right, join us in just a few moments, 11:30 a.m. Eastern time, for an interview with Jamie Dimon, the JP Morgan CEO, sits down with Bloomberg's Tom McKenzie for a conversation from JP Morgan's TechStars event in London. Listen for that interview with Jamie Dimon on Bloomberg Radio. Or watch on Bloomberg Podcast YouTube channel at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time this morning. In just moments, this is Bloomberg.
All right, let's see here. Come on. Let's see here. Let's listen to Goldman Sachs.
Thursday Night Football. It's on Prime.
This week, it's a grudge match in the Big Apple in a showdown under the lights. The Philadelphia Eagles.
Let's continue with the impact of the shutdown on the economy. Joining us here at Post 9 this morning is Robert Kaplan, Goldman Sachs Vice Chairman, Management Committee member, and former Dallas Fed President. Of course, Rob, it's good to have you in. Thanks for joining us. I mean, is the shutdown any competition for this wave of tech investment that the market's entranced with?
Not for the time being. I mean, on the margin, it will mean the economy is a little slower than it might have been. But I think the markets are pricing what they think is going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years. Regulatory relief, tax incentives coming, AI, data center, power boom. That's what's fueling the market, not what's going on in the current economy.
So are expectations for a reacceleration in economic activity legitimate, reasonable?
I think it's legitimate, yes. The issue we're seeing in the job market is, in my view, the market is sluggish, but there's a lot of mismatches. So there may be a view that people are changing their hiring in anticipation of AI. There's lots of open jobs, though, we're seeing in the construction, service sector, other sector. And the problem is either because of geographic inability to move or aspiration, college graduate doesn't want those jobs. There's plenty of jobs, but we've got a mismatch. Normally that takes some time to resolve.
Also immigration. I mean, subtracting immigration from it means fewer jobs, right?
This will be the lowest labor force growth we've had in, I can't remember when, because we have not only shut off lax immigration, which makes sense, but we haven't ramped up legal immigration, and we have not clarified the status on something like 12 to 15 million workers that are in the workforce, actively working, but some of them are not going to work because they're unsure of their status.
What do you think is happening with inflation? I mean, let's hope they reopen by next week so we get a CPI report. But I remember talking to you, Rob, about how it's the fiscal spending, the spigot was just open for so long, and that it's impossible to really fight inflation until that calms down. Where do you think we are now?
We're running well above target in the neighborhood of 2.75%. And the issue has been, everybody's talking about goods and the tariffs. Ground zero of the inflation issue is still services. We're running in the mid-threes, but we're not getting the goods disinflation we were getting. So inflation's going sideways. And this is why if I'm at the Fed, I want to be very careful not to go too much further with rate cuts when you've got inflation this much above target. I need to be convinced that the weakness in the labor market is sustained or maybe getting worse, because I think the neutral rate is not that much below where the Fed is right now.
Why are services inflation still so high?
Part of it is rents, part of it is we've got a very tight labor force, so it's been sticky. And I think some of the tariff inflation we hear from clients may be bleeding into services.
Well, Costin did a report on Monday over the weekend arguing that the impact of tariffs on Q3 earnings is going to be about a third more intense than it was in Q2.
Yeah, so we're seeing some margin erosion because of it. Having said that, big companies can manage it. Yes, they'll have some margin erosion. What we're seeing more pronounced is if you're a small business and you rely on imports, I think they're having active discussions about whether they can stay in business, and we're hearing more and more of that.
And that gets reflected, I think, in some of the qualitative commentary. Dallas Fed, Empire Fed. You get comments like, "We may have to shut the business."
That's right, and I think part of the sluggishness in the labor market and in hiring is due to what's going on with small business. Having said that, as we get to the end of the year, you got a number of tailwinds that are powerful. That could potentially cause some firming at least or reacceleration. And that's why the Fed's got to be very, very careful.
So when you say you don't want them to go too much farther, you think one more is appropriate, or do we not know?
So the way I would look at it, my own view is the neutral rate right now. Most aggressive case I can make for the neutral rate is it's in the neighborhood of 3.5%, 3.75%. That's different than other people have said. That's 2.75% inflation and 0.75% to 1% real. Okay, we're at 4.25% right now.
So there's room.
There's not much. You cut one
okay.
more time, and the problem is with inflation above target, I'm not sure I want to be at neutral. And the other comment I would make, which is lost sometimes in this discussion, above target inflation is a regressive tax on 80, 85 million workers, American workers who make 50, 55 grand a year or less, have lost 25% purchasing power.
They don't own stocks.
They don't have financial assets, and they're struggling to make ends meet. And I'm very sensitive to the impact of inflation running above target and continuing to on that group.
So if you were on the Fed still, would you be done?
I would be, because of the shutdown, it would probably push me to be more positive inclined about October, but the bar for me would go way up after October. I really need to see more evidence, and I think the market may be overpricing the probability of a December cut.
I think there's going to be at least one more cut for this year, but I would not be surprised if the job market is still becoming a little problematic. I wouldn't be surprised at 50 basis point cut this year, but definitely more cuts next year. At least another 5 cuts, depending on if it's a 50 basis point or a 25 basis point move. All right, let's listen into Bloomberg here.
Beside that is the time frame. You know, how long are you in it for, and what's your appetite for risk? Those two have always been the dictators on how and when you invest. If you're in it for the short run, I would not enter this arena because it could be very, very dangerous, and especially if your appetite for risk is very low. But if you're in it for the longer term, even if you have a low appetite for risk, I think it's a fantastic opportunity because longer term, the prospects are pretty optimistic.
Well, what are we doing in the bond market here, Nancy, in the fixed income space here? You consider 2-year treasury get about 3.6%. Is that seems like a pretty nice way to make a living, or we take some credit risk here?
Yes, and I think the buzzword here with the fixed income market is quality. You know, buy the most boring things, the most boring bonds that you can possibly get. Durations should be okay now. You could think longer term durations, and if we get another Fed rate cut or 2, then that's good news for bonds as well. And it's a great diversifier if we end up with a very volatile market in the stock side.
What seasonal factors should we be aware of? For a lot of investors, institutional investors, if they've just been long the market, long beta, we're talking about up 14% for the S&P 500 so far this year, up 18% for the NASDAQ. They can just sit back and do nothing. What do we need to keep in mind tends to happen in October, November, and December?
Well, fourth quarter historically has always been very, very strong. You've got, you know, a little bit of rebalancing, some people buying, some people selling. There's pension contributions or retirement plan contributions being made. So historically, fourth quarter has been a very, very favorable time to be in equities. However, you know, based on valuations, we could see a little bit of a pullback if we get some drastic news from any arena at all, whether it's the labor market or geopolitical or anything at all.
Nancy, one thing I've been amazed, particularly for retail investors, is their appetite for alternative investments, whether that's hedge funds, private equity, private credit, maybe even some real estate, things like that. Alternatives. How do you talk to your clients about alternative investments?
Well, I think alternatives have a place in every portfolio, mainly because by definition, it's uncorrelated to stocks and bonds. So theoretically, if all hell breaks loose and everything it takes a downturn, those should prevail or be a good buffer or serve as a good guardrail, so to speak. So there has been a much bigger focus on that, to have at least maybe 10 to 20%, depending on clients' time frame and appetite for risk.
How are they thinking about crypto? Because, there's this whole move towards a debasement trade where people don't quite trust U.S. government issued assets, whether it's the dollar, whether it's treasuries, and gold is certainly one way to express that, but increasingly so is crypto.
Yeah, I mean, I really can't comment on crypto, but I think that the most important advice we provide our clients in that arena is to be extremely cautious.
That's good. That's a good piece of advice, probably. But and I guess with all the ETFs out there, there's lots of ways to play it. Nancy, thanks so much for joining us. Nancy Daoud, a private wealth advisor for Ameriprise Financial here. All right, it is time for our daily check-in with Nathan Dean. Why? Because he's down in Washington, D.C., and it's his job to tell us what is going on in Washington, D.C., and that's a tough job in normal times, but a little bit more heated difficult today when we've got a government that's shut down. I'm not sure I'm seeing much conversation between the two sides. So, Nathan, you're down there in D.C., you're right in the middle of it. What's kind of the feeling down there these days?
So the feeling is that this shutdown is most likely going to continue for at least another few days, if not a little bit longer. I mean, like you just mentioned, both sides aren't really talking, and both sides really don't feel the need to talk at this point. Polling over the weekend suggests that Republicans are getting more of the blame amongst independents. The Democrats love that message. Republicans are also feeling pretty good because their base is pretty happy with their position of, we've passed a clean CR, the Democrats need to come to us. So both sides are feeling pretty good, and when that happens, neither side really feels the need to talk. Now, I will say is there are some pressure points coming up over the next few weeks, though, or just days. October 10th is when the federal government employees are going to miss their paycheck. And I think more importantly for that pressure point is on October 15th, this is when the military misses their paycheck. And so as the military misses their paycheck, policymakers are going to feel that pressure to come together and figure out what this deal looks like. Because ultimately, both sides are going to have to reopen the government. It's just a matter of when.
And we are starting to see more tangible results from, I don't want to say results, signs of damage because of the shutdown. There's flight delays, at least in the New York area already, because there's not enough air traffic controllers, for instance. There's flight delays into the Los Angeles area as well. Is this the kind of thing that gets constituents angry and starting to call their representatives in Washington to say, get back to work?
Yes, I mean, think of this government shutdown and the response to it is that like a ball that's slowly running downhill, and then all of a sudden it gets a little bit steeper, it goes much faster. I had a daily check-in with our equity strategists this morning, and I said, how are you feeling? And they said, look, if this continues into the next week, we need to start thinking about this more, because the message has always been that markets aren't really all that impactful by shutdowns, but as they go on, then the impacts get greater and greater. For example, at the end of the month, SNAP benefits runs out. And there are ways that the USDA could potentially get SNAP benefits into November, but it's tricky. So if you have exposure to groceries, for example, that's something you should start thinking about, maybe around that October 17th beyond timeframe, because then investors are going to get a little bit skitterish. So I will say is that right now we're still in the stages of everybody's just waiting around, waiting to see what happens. But ultimately, as this continues on, the market and for those of us who are trying to fly with air traffic controllers and TSAs, the impacts get greater.
Now, I want my air traffic controllers happy with their job.
Yes, yes, exactly. They're getting paid, they're happy, they're not worried about whether they can put food on the table.
Yeah. So, Nathan, what do you think the role has been and what could it be of President Trump in maybe resolving some of these impasses?
So, he just floated, you spoke earlier about this idea that he floated some openness to, negotiating on Obamacare subsidies. These are the subsidies that expire at the end of the year. And one of the reasons why the Democrats really were interested in this government shutdown. Now, look, we probably know what the framework of this deal looks like. It's a reopening of the government plus an agreement to deal either through a vote or an actual deal on these Obamacare subsidies. But both sides need to actually go through the motions before they start these negotiations. Now, President Trump walked back that remark a little bit, saying, look, I don't like Obamacare. But Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, just flat out said last night she wants to make a deal on this because her constituencies are impacted. So I think what happens is that eventually, as the parties get to that pressure that they need to come to the table, you'll see President Trump float this openness again.
And I think that's where the Democrats will say, look, we have, we have enough here to declare victory. Let's go forth. Let's conduct a negotiation and let's figure out what the strategy is to expand these Obamacare subsidies by the end of the year.
Paul, I go back to the idea that the president, the Republicans need to come up with a way of maybe embracing extending those Obamacare subsidies by branding it as something that's Trumpian.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And then that allows the president to take a victory lap. Marjorie Taylor Greene gets on board as well. So,
that's a good strategy.
Some thinking outside the box here.
Get on the Solar train, hit down the DC, make it happen.
Is that something, Nathan, that you think that they might be open to repackaging and rebranding it as a Trump idea?
Absolutely. I mean, this is a political debate, and politics has very strange outcomes. You could just call it Trump care or, something like that. And you never know. Exactly. I mean, it may get President Trump on board with this idea. So I'll say is that, this is anticipated. Right now, they're still going through the motions. Either side wants to negotiate, which is fine. I mean, obviously, it's not fine for the people that are impacted by this. But, our base case scenario is, as you get to this October 15th date where the military begins to lose funds, that's when the pressure is getting even greater. Because, look, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson has kept his caucus away from Washington. Why? Partly so that they're not giving interviews to the press, and they are being paid. And answering the question is, why are you being paid and the military is not? So a lot of this is political, but ultimately, I think President Trump and the Democrats ultimately will make a deal.
And Nathan, you mentioned here not going to get paid on Friday. I'm sure, your kid's soccer practice or drop-off line. You've got a lot of neighbors that work for the federal government. How nervous are they?
They're very nervous, especially this morning after President Trump floated the idea, and I'm paraphrasing here, that the White House memos essentially said that maybe you don't have to pay back furloughed workers. I mean, there are 750,000 workers at the moment that are furloughed. Only about 91,000, according to our estimates, are here in the Washington, D.C. area. 80% of the federal workforce is outside of the DMV. But I will say is that before, we could say that it's a 99% chance that these federal workers would ultimately get back their back pay. I would just say, and I'm guessing they're a 90% chance now. I don't think that it's going to be in this situation where these federal workers get back pay. But let's also not forget, the contractors that are furloughed, they don't get back pay. And so there's a lot of angst about this, and there's a lot of angst about whether or not Director of O&B Russ Vought follows through on his threats to conduct federal layoffs.
I was just going to go there. It just feels like every day there's a new idea that's being floated, whether it is mass layoffs or something like not paying federal employees for days that they've been furloughed. Does it feel like they're kind of letting things come out, leaking things, and seeing how the public reacts before deciding whether to move forward with it?
Yeah, and I think this is more of a political exercise than anything else, is that they're just putting out ideas to see how the public reacts to it and see how the Democrats react to it. I mean, a carrot and stick strategy, if you will. But I will say is that, if the Democrats continue to see polling data that independents are blaming the Republicans for this, and, some of that data was fairly substantial that these independents were blaming the Republicans. If the Democrats see that and President Trump follows through on his threat to fire workers or not conduct back pay, I think it pushes the Democrats back into their shell a little bit more and just say, look, we can't negotiate. Let's just keep the shutdown going a little bit longer.
All right, so is there anything in the next day or two that could be a catalyst here, or is this just grinding time out for another 4, 5, 6 days?
Well, I think it's grinding for the shutdown, but one of the things we are telling our clients is just non-shutdown related is be aware of potentially a farm aid package being announced as soon as today, potentially around $10 billion from the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent that would go to farmers. We did a quick analysis on the terminal that showed that this money would most likely be spent for seed and fertilizer in the fourth quarter. So it's a short-term gain, short-term problem alleviation. There are still long-term questions about related to soybeans. So as the government remains shut down, that farmer piece, that's where we're focusing our time at the moment.
Nathan, who's the number one person you're watching here? We talk a lot about President Trump, but he kind of takes himself out of it sometimes. Is it John Thune? Is it Chuck Schumer? Are they still kind of the keys to unlocking this?
They are. I mean, obviously, and I'm being very simplistic here, is that the House really doesn't matter. So any statement you see from Speaker Johnson or Representative Jeffries, take it with a grain of salt. For me, it's Senator Thune and Senator Schumer, and it's the gaggle of bipartisan senators that were on the floor last Friday. Think of Susan Collins, think of Mark Warner, think of, Senator Ossoff from Georgia. Those are the individuals that ultimately will figure out where this, shutdown ends. Because two Democrats and an independent that caucuses with the Democrats have already signed on to extend the government open until November 20th. They only need 5 more. And so as the pressure mounts, I would be looking at those bipartisan senators under the leadership of John Thune and Chuck Schumer to ultimately decide where this ends, because they are the ones, not the House and not the president, that will come up with the deal. They then goes to the president for his blessing.
Nathan Dean, thanks so much. Always appreciate it. Nathan Dean, Senior Policy Analyst with Bloomberg Intelligence. In just moments, we'll bring you a conversation with Jamie Dimon at the JP Morgan Techstars Conference in London. That'll be coming in just moments. But right now, let's go to Charlie Pellet and get a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Much, and this Bloomberg Business Flash is brought to you by Commonwealth, supporting more than 2,000 independent financial advisors with a 2-to-1 advisor to staff ratio. Small firm attentiveness, big advisor impact. Go to commonwealth.com to learn about their consultative support and technology. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, all in the red as Wall Street fails to gain traction. That rally that drove stocks to records is showing signs of fatigue. So right now, the S&P 500 index down 34, 67.05, down 5.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Clarity Factor. Clarity Factor will help you to concentrate on tasks, get rid of that brain fog, and by taking this every day, you're going to improve that neuroplasticity over time. You're going to have more dendritic connections. You're going to be thinking faster. Your memory will improve. This helps to support memory. Super important to take every day. Drink it with filtered water. Another great supplement is olive leaf extract. This will help to improve your lipid profile, help to bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels. So when you have less LDL and more HDL, you have less plaque buildup. Super important for your cardiovascular health. But olive leaf extract also brings down inflammation. That helps your immune system and your cardiovascular health. So please go to my store and get the olive leaf extract. And this season, the fall and the winter, it's really important to take this stack. Magnesium and zinc. This will help to boost up your immune system and help with your brain function. And vitamin C and magnesium, dual purpose, helps with your skin, boosts up your immune system, and helps with brain function. You can take them together, and magnesium also increases the efficacy of vitamin D3. When you take this, you're boosting up your immune system. Super important for the fall and the winter season. So a great stack, help with your immune system and your brain function, get the vitamin C and magnesium and the magnesium and zinc. Also help with your concentration and build better dendritic connections with Clarity Factor. So that's a great neural stack. And to help with your immune system and your cardiovascular system, take the olive leaf extract. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5, all caps, discount 5, you get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. All right, let's listen into Fox News.
You're looking live as mourners gather at the site of Hamas' brutal massacre on the Nova Music Festival 2 years ago during the horrific October 7th attack in Israel, where over 1,200 were murdered.
And despite Israel agreeing to a peace deal on 20 points that would end the war in Gaza, thousands across the globe are protesting Israel, the Jewish state.
Mark Levin is the host of Life, Liberty, and Levin, and he joins us now. Mark, thank you for being with us. I know it's a tough day for everyone around the world, or should be at least, but especially for you, because Israel holds a special place in your heart. I'm so sorry for what went on and for all of our Jewish friends. But now we're finding out within our lifetime, and National Students for Justice in Palestine, these two groups are organizing rallies, Mark. Here in New York City, there's going to be one in Sydney at the Opera House. What's your reaction? Anti-Israel protests.
My reaction is this. In 1964, a great thinker wrote a book called The Suicide of the West. You're watching the suicide of the West. World War II, we fought the fascists, Hitler, Tojo, Mussolini. The Cold War, we've been fighting the communists, and now there's a fusion of the communist Marxists and the Islamists. And the West is not capable of dealing with it internally. The president talks about the enemy within, he's ridiculed and he's correct. Europe is all but gone. I don't know that Britain could come back. I don't know that France could come back. They have these left-wing governments that appease, that are weak. They continue to have their borders open. If you listen to what these people are saying, the radical Islamists, they want to destroy the West. If you listen to their scholars and read their scholars as I have, this is revolution by immigration. They see the West as weak. They see these parliamentary systems. They see our Republican system as poised for defeat. And they have no belief in democracy and republicanism. That's why Israel is the only democracy in the entire Middle East. Hundreds of millions of Arabs and Muslims, and there's one democracy. It's called Israel. And all of the attacks are on Israel, all the propaganda is against Israel, all the Western media is against Israel, most of the Western politicians are against Israel, and we're told that Israel has a PR problem because it's Netanyahu. Israel doesn't have a PR problem. Netanyahu's the Churchill who's standing up to this. The West is weak. Our media are weak. Our politicians are weak. Some of them have been bought off. Some of them have just appeased. Some of them see votes in what is this new influx of immigrants and so forth. This is what you see. You would not have seen this 10 years ago, 20 years ago in the United States of America. 2 years after 1,200 innocent young human beings were slaughtered, raped, tortured, videotaped in the greatest attack since the Holocaust on Israel. 9/11 was the greatest attack on America since World War II and Pearl Harbor. Who did it? The same Islamists hit us on 9/11 as hit Israel on October 7th. And whose fault is it? Israel's fault? I mean, this shows you a sickness and a weakness in the West. And it is very important that we get the hostages out. But it's also important that Hamas is destroyed, because they will come back again. It is an ideology that doesn't die. This is out of the 7th century. These are primitives. These are barbarians. It is a bloodlust. The more torture, the more starvation, the more people they kill, the happier they are, the more successful they are. That's the ideology. The West doesn't understand the ideology, or people in the West don't want to deal with it. Our diplomats, for the most part, don't understand the ideology. They're looking, I need a deal today, I need a deal next month, I need a deal this, that's fine. But if Hamas comes out and survives after all of this, then they've won. And that's the way they view it. And unfortunately, I agree with that. Now, let us look at this. The fact of the matter is you have 1,152 Israeli soldiers that have died in this war. That's the equivalent of 40,000 American soldiers. There would be less IDF deaths if the IDF and Netanyahu and Israel were, as the Western media said, that is, just seeking genocide. That war in Gaza would be over in less than a month if the Israelis used the firepower they had in Gaza. But it doesn't matter. We still have news sites, including Israeli news sites, American news sites, who continue to talk about the casualty numbers that are fed to them from Hamas. No matter how many experts from the Wharton School and others say, it's not possible what they're talking about, the death of children and the death of women. It doesn't matter. They keep pushing it because they push an agenda. It doesn't matter that the New York Times used phony photos on the front page of its newspaper. You know, during the Holocaust, we have black and white films, largely thanks to Eisenhower, who said, I want you to get your TV crews in there, and I want these so people see what happened. We have film after film after film. People can see it online. You don't have that in Gaza. Instead, you have phony pictures. Instead, you have propaganda coming from Hamas that uses its hospitals, its mosques, that slaughters its own people. I mean, truthfully, we have 250 hostages taken. It's crucial that we get back those who are alive and the bodies of those who have been killed, because in the Jewish faith, it is important to get the body back. There's a belief in the Jewish faith that the body and earth in many ways are one. That's why it's crucially important. But that said, you now have, and I'm looking at the updated number again, 1,152 Israeli soldiers who have died. These are citizen soldiers, 40% of whom are under the age of 21. That's the equivalent in the United States. It's a nation of 9 million people, of 35,000 to 40,000 soldiers. And I would ask my fellow Americans this question. If the drug cartels came across our border in Texas and slaughtered
35,000 to 40,000 people in 5 hours. Took pictures of it, took movies of it. The raping, the pillaging, the decapitating of babies. And then on the way out, they grab another 10,000 as hostages and secrete them somewhere in Mexico. What the hell would we do about that? Would we say 2 years is too long? Would we care what the international press has to say? Would we care what these Islamist imams in Dearborn, Michigan have to say? Would we care? No. You have an Israeli army that has their enemy finally surrounded after being pulled back by the Biden administration. We've had these spurts and starts on negotiations, mostly as a result of the international community. They've now surrounded the enemy in the city of Gaza. And what are they told to do? When Berlin was surrounded, what did we do? What did we do during World War II? When the Japanese wouldn't surrender unconditionally, we didn't continue to negotiate with them, did we? We had to destroy them. You can't win a war if you don't destroy the enemy. We talk about forever wars. Well, they'd like to end it. Hamas is surrounded, and Hamas is now negotiating. Negotiating for what? Effectively, it's survival. The Israelis could finish them off. People said, this got to get over. The pictures are too much. The PR bad. This is why I don't think we could win World War II today with the kind of people in diplomacy around the West and so forth. They'd be showing the pictures of Dresden. They'd be showing the pictures of the Battle of the Bulge, how horrific it was. They'd be talking about all the civilian deaths and so forth and so on. I don't think we could win World War II today with the psychology and the mentality. And here's the thing. We're not losing anybody. We're here in the United States observing what's taking place. And we're saying, this can't go on much longer. Shouldn't the Israelis decide what needs to be done to survive? They are surrounded. This is a tiny country the size of New Jersey, with a population of a small to mid-sized state in the United States. They've defeated Hezbollah. They're trying to defeat Hamas. They've defeated Iran primarily. They're still fighting the Houthis. A tiny country surrounded by hundreds of millions of people, by 27 countries that are supported by the Russians and the Communist Chinese. They are the David against the Goliath. And yet, look how the propaganda has worked. The West, I hate to say it, but it's a wake-up call. The West is dying right now in front of your eyes.
Yeah, you see London, you see Paris, you see what's going on in both those countries. That's our future, you believe, in 5 years. I hear you, especially when who we're about to elect as mayor in New York City, and what we've seen go on over in Michigan. Al Jazeera is telling Arabic, said the meeting and the Red Sea Resort is so far very positive. They got the 20-point plan that Trump put out there. They're working through it. They're working on logistics of getting the hostages out. 20 plus is supposed to be alive. Number one, you think it's a good thing if this plan is followed through on, and what you expect to see happen?
First of all, we have a great president who's trying to do something about this. Unlike Biden, who is undermining Israel and basically giving aid and comfort to Iran and funding Iran. We have a president who's trying to bring this to resolution. There will not be an eternal peace. The Bible talks about the battle of good and evil. It is a forever battle, and it will be a forever battle. But that said, if the president can pull this off, it'll be absolutely remarkable and absolutely wonderful, assuming that the Israelis aren't giving too much. I mean, the fact of the matter is that
First of all, in Judaism, during the Messianic age, evil is dead. Satan dies. So the whole idea is that everything turns to a more peaceful world. So Levin is wrong. Levin, I mean, it's not a forever battle between good and evil. It's not a forever battle. Eventually, evil is destroyed. You're wrong. But that's during the Messianic age.
If Hamas survives, that's giving an awful lot. But it's up to the Israelis. And if the Israelis agree to this plan, and they do, who am I to say it's not good for their government? That's their elected government and so forth. All I'm doing is trying to warn our audience and the people. The dark clouds, they're there. They're getting darker and darker. You asked me, Brian,
how could it be on this day that people are literally protesting on behalf of the terrorists against a small democracy and the Jews? And it's in every capital in the West. It's in our own country in New York, and it is a poison. It is a gut cancer.
Now, I don't subscribe to Nietzsche. I like to call him Nietzsche, but I don't subscribe to Nietzsche. But he has some comments about this from a philosophy standpoint. In this division between the society of what is called the master morality and the slave morality, and then the priest morality. Now, in the master morality, there is this idea of good and bad. So virtue and the things that are positive in one's life for the nobility, that's good, all right? And anything not that is bad. Now, in the slave morality, which is what most people are, they're in the slave morality, they look at things as good and evil, and they're more focused on the evil. That things are evil, and then there is good. Now, the problem is that the nobility and the slave, they're in conflict. The slave morality, most people are in the slave class. They will view, well, individuals that are prosperous are evil. And so Nietzsche started to demonize Christianity and demonize even Judaism, where there is this almost like go to the lowest common denominator of the society, not to try. There is this aspect of almost like a mob mentality, and that anything of success must be inherently evil, because success propelled an individual or certain groups of individuals out of slavery, out of the slavery morality, into the master morality. But you got to remember, most of the society is slave morality, good and evil. All right. Now, this is not a Judaic concept. This is a Nietzsche concept. So there is this conflict between the two classes. The haves and the have-nots, the ones that have power, the ones that don't. Right? So you start to see in society, we the people, right, not getting the representative government that they thought they had, and they're starting to they're starting to have convulsions. There's strife. There's conflict in the society. You see it in France. You see it in England. The society's starting to devolve. So there's this battle between the slavery morality and the master morality. Now, Nietzsche also brought in the priest class, and that is the antithesis of the master morality. The slave morality is not the exact opposite of the master morality, but the priest morality is the inverse of this master morality. Now, I don't subscribe to Nietzsche. I think disagree with it. I come from a different perspective, different philosophical thought process. That's a little bit more metaphysical. But it's interesting to see that there is this battle in society, in secular society, between the haves and the have-nots. The master morality versus the slave morality. And it's not necessarily true that the slave morality is right. Because there is this idea that if you strive and you're successful, therefore you must be bad. The problem comes in is that if you're successful and you're causing a negative pernicious activity in the society because of your power, you're diminishing the will of the people because of your success, then it becomes a problem. But the slave morality is, if it's not good, it's evil. Or put it in a different way, if it's evil, then it's not good. And if it's not part of the slave morality, it must be evil. And therefore, the noble morality, the master morality, must be evil. So there's this conflict between the upper class and the lower class. So Nietzsche talks about this division, this conflict between the two, and how it can devolve. Now, it gets back into this idea of the remnant. Now, I don't think Nietzsche talks about the remnant. This idea that there's democracy, there's a republic that's lost. And that in future, hundreds of years from now, there will be a group of people, the remnant, that's part of the master morality that will reboot the republic. Because the slave morality cannot, because there's an infestation. There's this conflict. There seems to be a conflict within itself to try to prevent what I'll call the bourgeoisie virtue, preventing people from striving. And what's really the core of the United States? I think it's self-determination, right? The pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. It's individualism. It's not this collective Borg, right? So it's about meritocracy. But if you have a society that is all about trying to keep you down, don't be successful, because if you're successful, then therefore you must be evil. Then it's antithetical to the bourgeoisie virtue. So we're seeing a conflict between the haves and the have-nots. Now, in modern society, there's more variables to consider: indebtedness of the country, geopolitical issues, security, national security, technology. All these things are part of the mix. But if you try to zoom out to the 50-foot level and you look at this from a philosophical standpoint, there is this battle between what Nietzsche is talking about with the slave morality versus the master morality. And so if the slave morality gets so angry, you will have events like the revolution in Europe, the revolution in France, where it's bloody. What was happening during the French Revolution? They went after the aristocracy, the master morality. They chopped off the head of the master morality. So it was mob rule. But what happened with the mob rule? It ended up causing further conflict. And this is where I think the remnant comes in. It's like they try to reboot it. because they know that the masses aren't smart enough. They'll gravitate to democracy, but not understand that democracy, the will of the people in the masses by majority, by the will of the majority, can take away the property or the life of the minority. So the Constitution, our constitutional republic, is based on the concept that there's property rights. We're a rule of law. We're not a rule by majority. We're a rule by law. This is a major difference to what a pure democracy is. Because if you just have a democracy, you can easily have the majority take away the rights of individuals and then eventually devolve into socialism, one-party system, authoritative rule, and you no longer have a republic. So it's interesting in the lens of Nietzsche to look at this slave morality and see that we are seeing some of the problems that are starting to percolate up to the surface in Europe and even on the streets of liberal cities. Now, go back to liberalism. Liberalism, especially the ultra-liberals in the United States, what are they projecting? They're projecting this, kind of like a mob rule, right? This is part of that slave morality that Nietzsche is talking about. There's a battle that's happening now. I do think, and I've mentioned it multiple times, I do think that ultra wealthy individuals have too much political power through lobbying, and therefore their money needs to be taken away to reduce the power by 75%. But you have to be cognizant that the slave morality has a tendency to not have a part of its DNA to strive forward and be successful, because not everybody will be successful, and therefore if you're successful and the rest are not, just based on the pureness of slave morality, those ones that are successful are automatically considered evil. So there is this built-in mechanism to prevent people from actually striving. You see this with the ultra-liberal. They don't do ultra-liberals really want you to succeed? Do they want to have carbon tax? They want to tax and regulate? Does the ultra-liberal really want society to succeed? Or do they want the society to be, individuals within the society to be average, to be the same, to be monolithic? Is there meritocracy in ultra-liberalism? No, not even close. And this is the very point what Nietzsche is saying about the slave morality. Another aspect to it is this this overuse of evil. That if you strive, if you are in the pursuit of happiness and life and liberty, and you're successful, then you're evil. And what is grounding some of this? Now, in the ultra-liberal aspect, they don't really gravitate to religion. But Nietzsche was saying that the impetus of this slave morality was actually Christianity. This idea of being a little bit more weak and not be more forceful and Machiavellian. Now, if you're looking at a society that is weak, it usually can be conquered. Now, there's aspects of Nietzsche that I don't agree with, but I'm just trying to explain based on the understanding that I have, the limited understanding of Nietzsche that I have, that there is this battle that's going on between master morality and slave morality. And the slave morality, part of its ethos is not to try so hard. Part of its ethos is to be overly compassionate. Part of its ethos is, you know what? Be collective. Have collectivism. There's a collectivism that's tied to it. Versus in master morality, it's not about collectivism. It's about individualism. And a realization that what is good from their perspective, from the master morality perspective. I'm not saying I agree with this, but I'm just saying that from the perspective of the master morality, whatever they get, whatever positive things that they've obtained in life that makes their life better must be good. And anything else is bad. So there is this Machiavellian, there's this striving, there's this push forward. Now, if you look at nature, yes, there are Nash equilibriums and ecosystems do get into an equilibrium, right? That's healthy. That's a little different concept. But if you look at nature in itself, there's not compassion. Nature is not compassion. That's a human concept. The natural world, the jungle, there's not compassion. It's when the tiger is eating something, it's still a predator. And no matter how you want to spin it, the tiger is still going to be a predator. It's not going to be an herbivore, it's going to be a carnivore. So there's a part of nature that moves forward. Think about, I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but think about DNA in procreation and the idea of moving forward the code. We view ourselves as just as human beings that are really important and that we have goals and we have families and all this stuff. And that's, from a humanistic perspective, that's true. But from the essence of the code, the essence of the DNA, it doesn't care if it's in a human or if it's in a virus or if it's in a tiger or if it's in something else. All it cares about is the propagation, the continuation of its code. It doesn't care about anything else. There is no morality. There's no, so this falls in line with that. If it survives, if the code, the DNA code survives through time, then it's good. Anything else is bad.
It is spreading. The only one who's fighting this in the West is Donald Trump. He's trying to fight the anti-Semitism. He's trying to deal with these colleges and universities. He's trying to look at the funding sources. He's trying to do these things to try and prevent the United States from becoming Britain and France and these other what are becoming failed countries. No country survives in perpetuity. Where's Athens? Where's Rome? In fact, ironically, the only people who have survived so far are the Jews. They defeated the Persians, the Babylonians, the Persians. They out-survived them, I should say. They out-survived the Romans. They out-survived the Third Reich. They will survive this too. But this is why these are warrior people. They come out of the cafes. They come out of the law offices. They come out of their taxis because they know this isn't a battle. This is survival. And that's what it is. So I personally want to thank President Trump, who understands all this, who keeps reminding people, remember October 7th, even against some of his advisors and some of the diplomats and these Western leaders who talk about a two-state solution. They're destroying their own countries. And yet they're telling Israel what Israel needs to do. Israel's best policy is to ignore them, and that's what it's trying to do. And Israel's best friend is Donald Trump. I'm telling you now, if it wasn't for Donald Trump, if it had been Kamala Harris or somebody like that, Israel would be in much, much more dire consequences. As a matter of fact, the United States would be in much, much more dire consequences. The border would still be open. We'd still be importing these people and other people into the country who refuse to assimilate into our society. These are people, you know, Donald Trump uses this phrase, the enemy within. You know who else used that phrase?
To add to what I was saying about the slave morality, based on Nietzsche's perspective. Like I said, within that group, they are wanting to be overly compassionate and less aggressive, especially goal setting, less goal setting. Now, what did you see with the ultra liberals? Oh, we got to be compassionate for the Palestinians. Oh, we got to be compassionate for this group and that group. The oppressor and the oppressed. This whole idea in the DEI and the oppressed and the oppressor mindset that's coming from elite institutions, that's really fueling the ultra liberal. That's right out of Nietzsche. That whole idea of master morality versus slave morality. And the slave morality is viewing that the oppressor must be wrong, and that and that the slaves are the oppressed. This slave morality, but yet they're a prisoner. The slave morality is a prisoner of themselves. They've created their own prison because they're not willing to work. They're not willing to push forward. They're not willing to take risk because they're collective. Oh, we're going to be compassionate. We don't want to upset the apple cart too much. We don't want to have a meritocracy. We want collectivism. We don't want individualism. We want collectivism. That's what the slave morality is. So the slave morality is really enslaving themselves. So you have these ultra liberals that are kowtowing to different groups, like kowtowing to Black Lives Matter, kowtowing to Islamic terrorism. Do you think that a master morality would take a knee because of George Floyd? Or a slave morality would take a knee? So they've created their own slavery because they want to show on the exterior that they have some sort of compassion. Yet the group that they're trying to show compassion to wants to take your money through reparations. So again, here's another example where slave morality just makes the society worse off. This idea of individualism, this idea of the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. This is a constitutional concept. This is a constitutional republic concept. And that constitutional republic concept is not a slave morality. So this is the battle that's happening. Where, well, wait a minute. Should we have these ultra liberals tell us what we should be doing? Should we be kowtowing to Islamic terrorism? Should we let the border, through compassion of the slave morality, let's just open up the borders so anyone can come in? Because that's what should happen, because we have just full of compassion. Meanwhile, your culture is destroyed in the process. Your country can't afford it. If you put a bunch of cold water from a faucet in a hot tub, do you think the hot tub stays warm? No, it doesn't. So why do we assume unfettered immigration policy is the best, is the most compassionate? Slave morality will lead to the destruction of the society. All right, let's go to this China video here.
Well, welcome back. Artificial intelligence startup EdgeRunner AI is partnering with Meta.
Before we do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin B complex. If you're 40 years of age or older, this is really important to be taking. Vitamin B complex has the B vitamins, the first 4 B vitamins that help with your mitochondrial health and boost up your ATP through the electron transport chain. Vitamin B complex will rev up your cellular metabolism and protect your neurons. So take it every day. Good night formula. Good night formula will help you to get into 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep. That's really important to detoxify your central nervous system, to be well rested when you wake up in the morning, and to help to consolidate memory. If you have sleep deprivation chronically, what will happen is that you're increasing the chances of early onset of dementia, and you are speeding up your aging process. Now, to slow down the aging process, you want a good sleep. So take the good night formula every night, drink it with filtered water to get into those 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep. And when you do that, you're having better memory, you're increasing your neuroplasticity, you're having better dendritic connections, you'll be thinking better, you'll have less brain fog, and you're detoxifying your central nervous system. Super important. Good sleep regularly will slow down the aging process and let the body heal. Omega-3 will bring down inflammation and help your lipid profile. It'll help to bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels, and omega-3 reduces the stickiness of your red blood cells. This is really important for your cardiovascular health, and you should be taking this every day. You should also be taking this during the fall and the winter because you don't want your red blood cells to be sticking too much. People in the fall and the winter will start noticing that there are more clots, blood clots, that are going to be formed. Now, we all know why. I don't need to tell you. But please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Also, because the fall and the winter, you need to prepare. If you have a throat irritation, take the lozenges and the drops right away to mitigate the problem. Elderberry zinc. You get 21 in each bag. Get a few bags for your household. And I have drops in 100 count. You can get it in cherry flavor, lemon and honey and lemon flavor, and also blueberry. Get a few bags for your household. Be prepared. Have some at work, have some at home. You never know when you need it, but right when you have that throat irritation, mitigate it right away during the fall and the winter season. This is super important, all right? Because cases are increasing and you don't want it to fester. Because when it festers, it causes a whole bunch of other problems. So take it right away. The moment you have that throat irritation, take the drops and the lozenges. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
And welcome back. Artificial intelligence startup EdgeRunner AI is partnering with Meta to expand access to technology beyond the American military to our allies in Europe and Asia. Meta says that its llama-based language model, quote, can run on consumer-grade laptops, allowing service members to access cutting-edge AI, even in adversarial environments. The company goes on to say that being disconnected becomes mission-critical. Llama is supporting military missions without sacrificing data privacy or operational security. EdgeRunner AI formed a partnership with the Department of War this past summer, deploying its AI model to the U.S. military for free. Here now is the founder and CEO of EdgeRunner AI, Tyler Saltzman. Tyler, good to have you. Thanks very much for being here, and congratulations on all of this. Tell us what EdgeRunner does.
Thanks, Maria. I'm happy to be here, and thanks for having me on. So imagine a better version of ChatGPT that doesn't need the internet, but that's military specific. So we're providing that domain-specific intelligence. So me, for example, as an Army logistician, I'll require much different AI than a combat medic, for example.
Well, this is very important as you're talking about the military. You recently concluded tests using the platform. What did the tests show you?
Well, the test showed us that, these models are good, but really the problem that we're solving here is command and control. How do we make warfighters make a better decision in real time in disconnected environments? And these meta models think of them as the engines that power this decision making as we fine tune on all the military data to make it specific to the warfighters.
And of course, there's growing use of AI in the military because of national security worries. Tell me about the main adversary here, and that is China. Do they have access to the same kind of technology that the U.S. does?
They do, but frankly, they're a little ahead of us, which is concerning. So we need to take this seriously and step it up. Companies like myself, the tiny garage bands, but also the big tech firms as well. We all need to come together and figure out how to tell that better together story. So, in order to preserve national security, because it is a concern.
Yeah, of course. Well, political rights, an AI system that is poorly calibrated for conflict escalation can have dire consequences for nuclear warfare. Publicly available AI models are often bullish on the use of nukes. So tell me about that, Tyler. How can the U.S. military be better equipped to defeat China in the AI race when it comes to nuclear?
We need to create these LLMs that are actually smart and actually reason through problems. Right now, they don't. They mimic it. So, and that really goes back to the data. We need to have better data pipelines, but a stronger corpus of data, and the government has that. So if we can all come together and be unified, create that corpus of data, train these new LLMs on it, distill it to live on devices, that's sort of a step in the right direction that I'm excited that we're tackling.
Yeah, we're excited about it as well. Mike Lee, jump in here because we have been zeroing in on defense technology now for about a year here as we are watching President Trump's agenda dominated by national security and his efforts to keep America safe.
Yeah, well, look, from what I'm hearing is there are some really spectacular new processes at the Department of War. So, government bureaucracy getting new technologies through. You can have a cutting edge technology today that by the time it gets approved and implemented and purchased by the government 2 years from now is obsolete. So what are you guys doing to take advantage of this? Because it's my understanding there's all sorts of new programs that fast track these unbelievable technologies. I think Andrew's taking advantage of some of it. I'm sure something like yours is ultra important to the warfighter.
Well, thankfully we've got Pete Henseth. He's future forward thinking. We're working through new ways of moving faster, like, for example, OTAs, other transaction authorities. And so that's because of him and the current administration, we're able to move a lot faster than before. So, I would say that we're moving at breakneck speed now. We just need to keep our foot on the gas and keep it going.
And is this largely chips or strategy or drones or what? Tell me specifically what the company will enable.
We're going to enable chips, drones, and software, all of it. As we can run in disconnected environments, we can actually run these models in drones, on robots, on any kind of chip, whether it's Intel, AMD, or NVIDIA, and more. So we'll be everywhere. We'll be on the edge, the tactical edge, and again, helping warfighters make those decisions in real time. Hopefully not just win our battles, but dominate them.
Very exciting. Thanks very much, Tyler. Good luck with DrPaulCottrell. We'll be watching the story. Tyler Saltzman joining us. Thank you, sir.
Alrighty, let's listen into it looks like the Oval Office has a press conference going on here.
And again, we're going to treat people fairly. We're going to especially treat Canada fairly. But I can't believe it's taken so long where we get charged and don't charge them. Japan was a good example. We made a deal with Japan. You saw that one, a deal with Japan. It's a much different deal than we've had in the past. But they would send us millions of cars, no charge. We weren't allowed to send them cars. We sent them no cars. I doubt you had one car go into Japan because we were restricted. They didn't want our cars. Same thing with Europe, same thing with other places. So that all we do now is fairness, but fairness leads us to the most successful country there's ever been. We have some advantages over other countries, and we do have a great market. We have an amazing market. But you know what? If I let this go, if we didn't win this election, if we had these people that were running, that were ruining our country, destroying our country with their open borders and men playing in women's sports and transgender from everybody and windmills all over the place. If we allowed that to go on for another couple of years, we would be, I'm not sure that we'd even have a country. Yeah, Brian. And by the way, I'm not sure we would have even had a country. And now we have the most successful country in the world. Brian?
Yes, sir. What is your message to Democrats ahead of the next vote to open up the government? The American people are saying, open the damn government. What's your message to them right now?
Well, they're the ones that started it. They're the ones that have it. And it's almost like a kamikaze attack by them. You want to know the truth? This is like a kamikaze attack. They almost, they have nothing to lose. They've lost the elections. They've lost the presidential election in a landslide. I saw the other day where Kamala said this was a very close election. This was one of the biggest sweeps that anybody's ever had. Won the popular vote by millions, won the electoral college by a massive amount. They said, if I got
another important feature, you can look at popular vote totality across the country for voting for the president. You can look at the electoral college. It's based on each state having a certain amount of electoral votes. And you can look at the county level. And if you look at the county level, the far majority of the counties are, I think there's like 3,400 counties. Only 500 were Democrat. So almost 3,000 were for Republicans. There's this country, don't believe the mainstream media bullshit. This country is by far at the county level Republican, by far. Now what the problem is that some of these counties that the Democrats do have a stronghold on are in high density areas, like New York City or LA or Chicago, see? But if you look at it from a county level perspective, the far majority of the country is Republican.
This was the Middle East. Behind you. Is what? No, it's not over. It's never. I think it's never going to be over, frankly. But Canada's worked hard, and they've done a much better job than in the past. We have very few people coming in through our southern border too. We've worked with Canada and we've worked with Mexico, so we've made it a lot better. Wait.
On fentanyl, any amount is too much. So we've gotten it down. It's down substantially. It's less than 1%, but it's still too much. It's too much at home in Canada. Yeah, we got to stop it.
MCA, are the two of you both committed to seeing it through in the renegotiation of that deal that you made?
Well, we could renegotiate it, and that would be good, or we could just do different deals. We're allowed to do different deals if we want. We might make deals that are better for the individual.
What's your preference?
I don't care. I want to make whatever the best deal is for this country, and also very much with Canada in mind. Yeah, go ahead, please. Go ahead, sir.
Sure. On China, what more can the United States and Canada do together to counter China?
Well, you have to be able to compete. They're a great competitor, and Mark and I both know that. And you have to be able to compete. We have big advantages over China for lots of different reasons, and I think we're doing very well with China. I get along very well with President Xi. I'm going to be meeting him in a few weeks, as you know. I'll be meeting him in South Korea. But we've had a very good relationship for a long time. But you have to be able to compete. To do well with China, if you can't compete, you're not going to do well with China. And Canada is very competitive. I can tell you that. Canada is a very competitive country. I think Canada's done very well over the years with China.
Yeah, we have. But we'll do better together.
Yeah.
What
guarantees are you giving your Arab partners that Israel will not resume its offensive after the hostages are released?
Well, the primary guarantee is once this deal happens, if it does happen, look, they're in negotiations right now, we are going to do everything possible. We have a lot of power, and we're going to do everything possible to make sure everybody adheres to the deal. Okay?
How do you see the shutdown?
Oh, sure. I mean, they're all Democrat delays. There are delays at the airport. That's standard. And again, this is something that every day we put forth a bill. It's just a continuation. It's a very simple thing to sign and very simple to do. And I really think that these are people that I think they have nothing to lose. They have a party that's out of control. They have no leader. Nobody knows who the leader is. I look at people with very low IQs like Crockett, this woman Crockett. I never met her, but she's a low IQ individual. I look at AOC talking about how if they want to negotiate, they can come to my office. She's not in that position to do that. And who the hell is she to say that? And then I watch Nancy Pelosi not knowing what to do. I watch their leadership. Look, Schumer is petrified of primary because he's not going to win probably against anybody in a primary. You know, Schumer did the right thing, but he handled it badly originally a year ago. He did probably the right thing, but he handled it badly. I think Schumer's incapable of making a deal. They are a mess. They're a party that has no leadership. They have, and they have no policy. You know, I think we have great leadership, but we also have great policy. We have strong borders. We have no men and women's sports. Basic things. We're not going to take your child away and change the sex of your child. We're not going to do things like that. What they're doing to the country is so incredible. And they got away with it with all their woke crap, and now it's stopped. And we have a country that's based on common sense and strength and intelligence. I mean, we have the United States of America, and I say it all the time. Other leaders have told me this. Mark hasn't yet, but I think he would. A year ago, we were a dead country, and now we are the hottest country anywhere in the world. Maybe Canada, I'll get Canada, because I do like Canada. But, you know, we're the hottest country in the world right now. There's never been a country that has the kind of money coming into it. There's never been anything like this. There's never been a country that if you take $1 trillion, that would be unbelievable.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the dual purpose deodorants. It's for males and females. These deodorants you use daily. They'll help you to smell better, but also they'll help to detoxify your body. It's made from essential oils from the Himalayas, very high quality ingredients. You can get it in citrus, and you can get it in peppermint, lavender, and tea tree. Again, it's dual purpose. They'll help to detoxify your body, and you use it as a deodorant. And by detoxifying your body regularly, it's going to help with your immune system, your endocrine system, even your brain function, and your other organ systems. Zeolite is another way to detoxify your body. This will bind to heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals and allow you to urinate them out within 6 to 8 hours. Take 3 small drops underneath your tongue, take filtered water, do that every day, and you're detoxifying your body, helping your immune system and endocrine system. And another great stack that's dual purpose is the following. Turmeric. Turmeric will help bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals. It'll help to improve your immune system, help with your cardiovascular system by bringing down inflammation and reducing plaque formation. And by bringing down inflammation, you're helping your cerebral system, brain function. Ashwagandha root brings down inflammation, helps to control cortisol levels and your blood glucose levels. That will help with your immune system, your cardiovascular system. And by bringing down chronic inflammation, you're helping your cerebral system. Lignans, very important to take every day. This is a powder. You mix it with soft foods, filtered water. Now, this will soak up free radicals, help with your immune system and your endocrine system, bring down inflammation. You'll recover quicker in a workout. And by bringing down inflammation, you're helping the immune system, your cardiovascular system, and brain function. Now, stacking these together is a powerful stack for brain function, to help with your brain function, bringing down that inflammation, helping with your cardiovascular health, and helping boost up your immune system. And by boosting up your immune system and bringing down inflammation is super important, especially during the fall and the winter season. So this stack is super important if you want to prepare for what's coming in the fall and the winter. So please go to my store, get the lignans, the ashwagandha root, and the turmeric. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. It's all caps, discount 5.
This keeps going on. If this keeps going on, it'll be substantial. And a lot of those jobs will never come back. But you're gonna have a lot closer to a balanced budget, actually. Say it? No, I think he's a great prime minister. I mean, he could represent me anytime. I will tell you, I'm not saying that because he is a very strong, very good leader. He's a nice man, but he could be nasty. He could be very nasty, maybe as nasty as anybody. I think Canada, let me put it this way, I can tell you this, because I deal with lots of leaders all over the world. He's a world-class leader. He's a man that knows what he wants, and I'm not surprised to see that he won the election and won it substantially, and I would think he's more popular now. He's a good man. He does a great job, but he's a tough negotiator.
So what's moving things up? If he's a great man and you want to do a deal with Canada, why don't you?
Because I want to be a great man too. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, everybody out. President Trump, Prime Minister Mark Carney, that had to be the loudest conversation in the Oval Office that we've heard in some time. Live here on Bloomberg Radio, Balance of Power. I'm Joe Matthew, alongside Michelle Giambristo in Washington. Thanks for making this program part of your Tuesday. Really interesting. They sure seemed like they were getting along, and a number of headlines crossing the terminal with regard to trade. You do get the sense, Michelle, that we could be on the verge of a deal here. These were two gentlemen who had nothing but nice things to say about each other and each other's respective countries.
A lot of flattery, a lot of laughter, and it was remarkable. The first chunk of that conversation was remarkably on point, very focused on trade.
True.
Notable, though, the one thing that they seemed to agree on is that they wanted to remain competitive with each other. So each kind of digging in on their side. Trump talking a lot about autos, Carney talking about a range of issues. Of course, there's layers and layers of tariffs that Carney would like to see removed.
That's true. We suspect that we'll hear more from the president, likely on Truth Social, is the way these bilateral meetings and state visits have gone, if there is, in fact, some news to come from this. Talked about a lot of other issues, of course, because they opened this to the floor. We want to bring Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall back into the conversation with us here in our Washington bureau. Tyler, I heard the word insurrection a couple of times here, and I think that's pretty deliberate. When the president was asked about troops in American cities, he said, Chicago, a city with a lot of crime, and if the governor can't do the job, we will do the job. Describes D.C. as a raging hellhole, or at least it was before the National Guard troops rolled in. This idea, though, that Stephen Miller has put forth, political insurrectionists, the local authorities who are pushing back on these troops coming to town.
Right, it does continue. What's really been an escalation in rhetoric from the White House when it comes to this issue. It's something that we're watching closely to see how these local cities are going to end up responding here. It kind of dovetails into this other issue, though, when we were talking about running the government and the government shutdown, because we heard some equally harsh words from the president during these remarks, really pointing to the Democrats related to the moves that they're taking against the troops going in, but also the moves that they're taking, as he's saying, holding the government hostage when it comes to those reopening negotiations. It was really interesting to hear some of the headlines come from President Trump on this, telling reporters in the room that in 4 to 5 days, we're going to hear where he stands on those potential layoffs. We know that the threat of permanent layoffs has repeatedly come into the discussion, but we've yet to see it really come to fruition, which has raised questions about whether or not this is a negotiating tactic or part of the administration's broader agenda.
It's really something last evening, Michelle, the president made reference to a deal, or at least talks with Democrats on a deal to extend Obamacare subsidies. they kind of walked back those comments. But Bloomberg Scholar Woodhouse in the Oval Office, they're talking about back pay, which also remains a pretty big question here.
Yeah, that's another moving part that, and notable. You talked about that exchange yesterday. It'll be interesting to see if the Democrats seize on that again today, because Trump did open the door to those sort of healthcare talks that every other Republican was saying were off the table before he then closed the door in Truth Social Post hours later. So we'll see if they can kind of seize on that and say,
I'm going to go to a video. I'm going to go to a video clip from Fox Business about Social Security collapse warning. But before we do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You're going to need to build muscle when we have a civil war in the United States. Now, a great way to do that is to take Myotrol. This will help with gene expression to build muscle. You do some resistance training, take Myotrol, and guess what? Your body starts to express proteins that you need to build muscle. Now, this has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help with that gene expression to build muscle and maintain muscle. This is super important to take if you're male or female, 40 years of age or older. When you get older, your genes start to methylate and they don't express as much. Sometimes they're shut off completely. And this is part of the reason why it's harder to gain muscle and maintain muscle when you're older. So it's really important to take Myotrol every day, do some resistance training, and build up that muscle and maintain it. This will also help with your mitochondrial health. And that's important so you have the energy to maintain muscle. And when you have more muscle, you're going to have more vitality. You're going to be more energetic. You're going to be more lively. So it's important to take. Now, if you're an athlete, younger or older, you will benefit from Myotrol to increase your strength for your sport. Another great supplement that you can take separately or stack it with the Myotrol is Gladiator Barley. Now, Gladiator Barley is a high-density protein. You mix it with soft foods, filtered water, or smoothie, or even just with milk. But take it every day. This is a month's supply. This will help to build strength. So you do resistance training. This will help you to build that muscle and that strength. And this will help to detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals by superoxide dismutase. By detoxifying your body, bringing down inflammation, and soaking up free radicals, you're helping your endocrine system, you're helping your immune system, you're helping your cardiovascular system, you're helping your brain function. Because by bringing down that inflammation, these different systems will perform better. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Gladiator Barley. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order.
We're speaking with the Democrats, and some very good things could happen with respect to healthcare. I will say this, just hang in there, because I think a lot of good things are going to happen. That's all I can say. I mean, I think a lot of good things could happen, and that could also pertain to healthcare.
That's President Trump in the Oval Office signaling a willingness to negotiate with Democrats as the shutdown extends into day 7 this morning. The president wrote on Truth Social last night, "I'm happy to work with Democrats on their failed healthcare policies or anything else. But first, they must allow our government to reopen," a sentiment which John Thune made to me on Sunday as well. The House passed government funding bill failed again in the Senate last night by a vote of 52 to 42. Senate Majority Leader John Thune is expected to force another vote on government funding today. Joining me now is the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget President, Maya McGinnis. Maya, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. And you do such fine work in terms of watching our debt and spending. What do you see happening longer term as this government stays closed for business?
Well, government shutdowns are never a sensible way to run the government, obviously. This leaves our government fighting while our enemies around the world, their governments are laughing at us, and it's clearly a sign of dysfunction. One of the deeper concerns is that the fight that we're having about reopening the government is not about how to fix our fiscal situation, which it occasionally has been in the past. It's actually a debate about whether to keep spending levels where they are in discretionary spending, or to increase them, to spend more on healthcare, and not by paying for it, but rather by borrowing, which would add more to the national debt. So I've got two huge concerns here. Our fiscal situation is unsustainable, and our government is not able to operate in a way that is dealing with all of these challenges. And the huge level of polarizations are making these fiscal challenges even more difficult to address. So I remain deeply concerned that we can't operate right now.
Right. So what do we do? I mean, the national debt is rising at an alarming rate. It is now nearing $38 trillion. As you know, that equates to more than $326,000 of debt per American taxpayer. My economists are warning of a weakening American dollar, other impacts as well. Your reaction to this and the solutions that we need.
You bet. We have a very serious problem, and the first step is to actually talk about it honestly. Instead of politicians promising the sun, the moon, rainbows, unicorns, all sorts of things, we need to start talking about the situation as it is. We're going to reach record levels of debt never seen in this country before in just a few years. The problems start with looking at where the growth in the budget is. The largest areas of growth come from retirement and healthcare, and disturbingly, interest on the debt, which is growing faster than any other government program. Now, the things that I'll say are the opposite of what politicians say because they're not willing to level with the American people, but we have to fix Social Security. It becomes insolvent in 7 years. We need to look at reasonable things like means testing, raising the retirement age, lifting the payroll tax cap. We have to change the way the healthcare system is delivered to generate savings, and we have $25 trillion in tax breaks over the next decade. We could limit a lot of those and help start to close this gap.
Yeah, it's a great point that you make, particularly about the Social Security age issue, because that seems like an easy one. It wouldn't affect the people who are very close to retirement. They're going to get what they expected. But younger people who may not even be expecting it, why not move the retirement age higher, given that we're living longer?
Absolutely, it could be win-win in terms of expectations. When the program started, retirement age was 65, life expectancy was 62, so it made sense.
You really think you're going to have a job with AI? Think about it. You want to extend that? My method is better in terms of cut the benefits in tiered sections every 5 years. If you're going to be starting to retire within that section, you get a certain amount. The ones that are retiring soon will get 100% of their benefits. But the ones that are retiring 15 years from now are going to get diminished benefits. By raising the age, that's not going to solve the problem. It's just kicking the can down the road. That's not solving the problem of debt and the over-reliance of social programs for your livelihood. What you need to do is save more, spend less, save more. You think about all the crap that you buy and you really don't need. Yet you don't take care of your health. You don't take care of your retirement, but you'll buy all this frivolous crap that no one needs. Now, here, you put it in the perspective of AI. Less jobs will be available. There's some experts in economics that are saying, guess what? AI is going to eliminate 100, I don't believe this figure, but they say AI is going to eliminate in the next 10 years 100 million jobs in the United States. 100 million jobs. Now, I don't think that's true. It's probably a quarter of that. So even if it's a quarter, that's 25 million jobs in the next 10 years. 25 million. And if they're saying that you need to extend the age requirement for Social Security, you really think you're going to get a job when you're like 70, 75 years old? No. Most people, once you hit about age 50, and there's some sort of corporate restructuring for whatever reason, AI implementation, a buyout, whatever it is, merger acquisition, they're just downsizing the company, whatever it is. It's always harder for those people that are in their 50s to get rehired in a different company because of their age. So it's just going to be exacerbated. You think people that are laid off at age 60 are going to have an easier time to get work? Of course not. So extending the age doesn't make any sense. This would work fine if you happen to stay employed with a company. But what happens when they get laid off and they can't find any more work? What do you do then? It's a stupid fucking solution. This better solution is be a producing country, have more economic cluster, have less reliance on social programs like Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, save for your retirement, and stop frivolously spending on stuff that makes people like Tim Cook rich. How many times do you need to update your iPhone at $500 or $1,000 a pop? Does that make you wealthy? No, it'll make Tim Cook wealthy. And that's the very issue what's going on in the United States. And this division between the haves and the have-nots. So we're going back to this whole slave morality and master morality from Nietzsche. The slave morality always keeps them enslaved because what they're doing is that they're consuming content, they're consuming products, they're consuming services that only make the master morality more viable. So extending the age isn't going to help. It's not going to help because there's going to be so many people that hit age 55 they won't be able to find work. It's the same problem that you're seeing with the younger generation with entry level once they get out of college. AI took the jobs. On the other side of the spectrum is that the worker's going to be too old and AI took the jobs. So how's this going to help? Another dumb broad having a stupid solution.
Now the retirement age is up to 67 and life expectancy is in the 70s, 80s, 90s and growing quickly. Young people don't think they're going to get anything like you just said. So if we can lock in benefits, but you are expected to work longer, assuming that you're able to, they would come out ahead of where they think they're going to be. Nobody's touching current retirees' benefits. The AARP should stop trying to scare people.
Most people will not be able to find work after they get laid off if they're in their 50s or older. Most people will not be rehired. So how many people actually get to age 68 or 70 in the workforce? Rare. Super rare. Stupid. It's a stupid policy. It's a dumbass policy.
Become a part of the solution here. And we should talk about adjusting the program for the things that have changed in the way that we're all living our lives. So that's a great place to start. Everybody behind the scenes knows that it makes sense. It's just that politicians keep demagoguing it when it's a very reasonable policy.
Yeah, and by the way, I have asked Frank.
YouTube Premium is ad-free YouTube and the YouTube Music app all together. Uninterrupted video.
Yeah, and by the way, I have asked Frank Bisignano this same question, and it seemed to me that he was thinking about that, and that was certainly a serious contender on the table. Of course, Frank Bisignano, the head of Social Security Administration, was just promoted. Scott Bessent made him the new Chief Executive Officer of the IRS, creating this new leadership structure and modernizing the IRS. So we wish him well on that role as well. Maya, walk us through what happens to these important agencies should we stay on this track that we're on right now, because I know that you very much pointed out that Social Security will go insolvent in 10 years, Medicare, Medicaid also in trouble. So walk us through that as we await the details of this shutdown and what happens next, Maya.
Well, the interesting thing about government shutdowns now is that we are actually able to operate because we've left so many things exempt from a shutdown. If you really wanted to end shutdowns quickly, you'd actually shut down the government, and people would realize in a day or two that you can't function that way. But so many of these areas are exempt. People will still get their Social Security benefits. Most of the government will still work. I'll tell you where a big problem is going to be, though. A week from now, if members of the military do not get their paychecks, I think that's the first major pressure point. So on the 15th, those paychecks, I believe, need to go out. And if we get past there, we're looking at a much more serious shutdown. But you always have reporters trying to say all the effects of these things, and there's so few things that actually are affected. You're going to a national park, it's terrible. But otherwise, most people don't really feel a government yet, but those paychecks would hit.
Yeah, I mean, the October 15th is the likely first missed military salary payment, as you mentioned. October 20th is likely the first missed federal worker payment as well. Maya, what kind of policies do you want to see in terms of spending? Because lawmakers have been saying over and over again they want to get back to pre-COVID spending. How do you get back to pre-COVID spending when you're talking about reissuing those Obamacare subsidies, which were given out during COVID, which was an emergency moment in time?
Exactly. What happens is anytime you offer a new government spending, or tax cut for that matter, it is very hard to ever pull it back, even if it's supposed to be temporary, even if it's an emergency measure. The first thing we should do is the government spending that we're looking at extending to fund the government for the new fiscal year, we should go back to having spending caps. We did for the past 2 years. They were very helpful, and they've expired. We should extend spending caps as part of however we open the government and fund it for the next fiscal year. The second thing is we got to go back to, we have to start talking about how to generate structural savings in our healthcare and our retirement programs. And if all we do is talk about how to give away more money, these programs will become more entrenched. The sense that you shouldn't have to pay for things will become entrenched. Our debt will continue to explode. And as you alluded to before, the dollar's already there's a real risk to the dollar. And this role that we've had as the reserve currency is an incredible benefit to the U.S. We would be so silly and self-harm inflicting if we squander that right now, which we're on the way to by creating all this uncertainty and all this irresponsibility.
Yeah, the uncertainty is critical, and that's what, exactly what business people need to put money to work and invest in long-term projects, certainty. Maya, great to see you. Thanks very much for walking us through all of that. We appreciate your time.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the collagen. This collagen will help to improve your skin, your hair, your nails, your musculature, your joint health, and even your bone density. Take it every day, mix it with soft foods, filtered water, a smoothie, or even with milk. Take it every day and do some resistance training. Super important. C60 is a very potent antioxidant. You can get it in avocado oil, extra virgin olive oil, or MCT coconut oil. Now, C60 is a carbon molecule of 60 carbons that are bounded together. Looks like a soccer ball, or a fullerene, it's the technical term, and it will soak up free radicals. It's 1,000 times more potent than vitamin C, a molecule of vitamin C. Now, by soaking up free radicals, you're reducing stress in the cell, you're improving the health of the mitochondria, you're increasing your ATP levels, so your cell is going to be performing better. It has less free radicals, less stress, more energy. So your tissues and your organ systems are going to perform better. Soaking up free radicals at the vascular level is going to reduce the concentrations of oxidized LDL, so you have less plaque formation. And C60 will help with boosting up the endocrine system and the immune system and reduce stress in the neuron. When you're soaking up free radicals at the neuron and improving the mitochondria of the neuron, it'll have more energy, and the neuron will be able to produce more neurotransmitters. And by having healthier, less stressed neurons, the myelin sheath will be intact, and you'll have better communication between the neurons. So your neuroplasticity is going to improve, your cognitive function will be better, your memory will be better, your overall brain function improves. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, take C60, take a teaspoon a day, preferably on an empty stomach in the morning. If you work out, take it before your workout, and they'll soak up the free radicals that you're generating during the workout, and you will recover quicker from your workout. By taking a teaspoon a day every day, you're going to slow down the aging process. In addition, C60 helps the basal layer of the skin. By soaking up those free radicals, And improving the basal layer, your skin cells, as they start to move towards the surface, over time, your skin will improve. You will see the benefits of C60 in your health. You'll feel it in 2 months of taking it. Within 1 year of taking it every day, a teaspoon a day, you're going to physically see you looking younger. Now, assuming that you have proper diet and exercise, proper supplementation, mindfulness, learning new things, if you approach this from a holistic perspective, you're going to slow down the aging process. And a major part of the protocol is to soak up free radicals and bring down inflammation. Soak up those free radicals, make sure you take C60. You can get it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. I've been taking this since 2016. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and use discount 5, all caps, discount 5, and you get $5 off. The link is in the description of this video and all my videos. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
Okay, after a government shutdown, but it appears that the issue that they're taking with this is that Congress would have to appropriate those funds specifically. This shouldn't be considered to be an automatic guarantee, and that's really what we're going to be looking for here. It's definitely raising the stakes. President Trump said in this Oval Office meeting with the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney that in the next 4 to 5 days we should know where those potential permanent layoffs shake out. But Joe, we're up against a pretty firm pressure point later this week, Friday, October 10th. That's going to be the first missed paycheck for many federal workers.
4 or 5 days, he must be thinking, I guess, about Monday, which sounds to me like he wants to give leaders on Capitol Hill room to make a deal or peel off enough Democrats to pass the CR.
Well, it was interesting to hear President Trump basically signal that he could be open to negotiations. That was broadly taken as this positive step, even as Republicans have really been standing firm here that the government needs to reopen before any of these talks can take place. Now, what I'm really watching for is where a potential agreement shakes out on expanding those Affordable Care Act premium subsidies, whether or not a commitment to an up and down vote would potentially be enough for Democrats, because the thing with these subsidies is that Republicans are divided on them. Many of them go to people in these states that President Trump won in 2024. These are red states that didn't expand Medicaid and subsequently have a lot of people on Obamacare insurance exchanges.
This, of course, all this style of references came in the middle of an Oval Office meeting with another world leader. Prime Minister Mark Carney is in town. They're here to talk about tariffs and trade. There were a couple of questions about that. Most of this was on domestic politics, though, and that's what happens when you have a room full of American reporters. But do we expect an announcement from the White House today on a deal with Canada?
Well, it was a relatively warm meeting, as you saw. Mark Carney calling President Trump a transformative president, but we can't lose sight that Mark Carney really did campaign on countering President Trump and his trade agenda, and we really haven't seen a lot of movement when it comes to the trade negotiations. Canada is still facing that 35% tariff for non-USMCA compliant goods, though a lot of goods coming over the border, about 55% or so, are compliant. But it's really those sector-specific tariffs that I'm watching for to see if there's any sort of movement when it comes to negotiations. They are 50% for steel, aluminum, and copper. Those are really high rates, and they're impacting a range of sectors when it comes to Canada. It was interesting, though, because President Trump seemed to demur multiple times when asked, what would it take? What can Canada give in terms of concessions to get this over the finish line? As you all know, there's a range of things that this White House is looking for, from market access to curbing fentanyl to then digital services taxes, something that has repeatedly come up in the conversation.
A lot going on around here, Tyler. It certainly reminds us how much has yet to be determined when it comes to Canada. We've spent so much time looking at Europe, looking at India, looking at China, that our nearest neighbor and biggest trading partner has yet to be resolved. Tyler Kendall, frequently on the north lawn of the White House. Lucky to have her in studio today, our Washington correspondent. Tyler, thank you so much. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington, and it's great to have you with us here as we continue the conversation with someone who's in the middle of it all with regard to the government shutdown. As I mentioned, not all lawmakers have gone home, and that includes Congressman Mike Bost, Republican from Illinois, who is chair of the House Veterans Affairs Committee. And just to give you a sense of who we're about to talk to here, as I like to let you know exactly where a lot of these members are coming from, because, they're real people too, and bring a lot of unique experience in many cases today. Mike Bost, former firefighter, U.S. Marine, ran his family's trucking business, member of the Main Street Partnership. How did I do, Congressman? Will it be the middle? Will it be the Main Street Republicans who figure a way out of this?
You know, Joe, I think it's a case where we need to make sure that the Senate today makes the vote and comes back today. Now, whether that happens or not, I don't know, but I know that every day a shutdown goes on, more pain is felt by more people. And when I'm chairman of the VA, I know about where we're going to see those shortfalls. You know, right now we have several, though we have put a front load on the medical, most of the medical providing, and most veterans won't leave out on their main services, which is their health care. But when you start talking about TAP programs, people leaving the military, when you start talking about the Fox grants, those Fox grants are special grants set up for contractors providing mental health. When you start talking about daycare workers for those people that are homebound veterans, those are all on contract. We're trying to work with the Secretary at this time to make sure those keep going. But each day we go further, that is more and more danger. Remember, we in the House, we've done our job. We send it to the Senate. The Senate keeps bringing it back up. There's those holdouts. They need to go ahead and open government, and then we can look into all the other things they're bringing up, because those are those things that we can negotiate while we work on this budget, but not while we're in a shutdown.
Understood your point. Mr. Chairman, we spoke with the Secretary, Doug Collins, about what this means for the agency and what it means for the delivery of veterans services ahead of our conversation with you today. Here's what the Secretary told us.
The positive news for our veterans, especially for those who get 9 million plus who get their health care through us, that they're not going to see any difference in what they are seeing. Our vet centers are still open, the counseling going on, our mental health outreach and placement are still going on. So this is a good time for that. And I think really is to look through this, is we're going to do what we have to do to take care of our veterans, and we have the funding to do that.
Did the Secretary frame that appropriately? Because his message that evening was that benefits are not being affected by this. You're looking down the road, though, Congressman. How long before they are?
And let me tell you that right now we are already operating without without the ability of the Congress to authorize those particular side contracts. Everything the Secretary was talking about is the actual function of the VA, that is the VA contract. As we're moving forward, we're a little bit worried as those contracts are starting to not have authorization numbers. Are those things that can lose out? Your health care is still going to be there. Your appointments are still going to be there. However, when we start talking about the TAP program, that's service members leaving. When you start talking about home care, when you start talking about the Fox grant, which is mental health, we have other mental health programs. But each one of these is important in itself for certain individuals. We're okay now, and I'm glad we are, but we've got to pay attention. This can't go out for a long time.
Some are suggesting we could have another record here. I'm not sure anybody has a clue at this point, Congressman, as long as the leadership are not engaged cross aisle here. And I just wonder what you think. The president mentioned last evening from the Oval Office that talks were underway with Democrats on health care. Is that a plan that could be done through back channels, that could be done quietly to bring Democrats to the table, or does there need to be some sort of grand bargain here that involves government spending?
I really believe that if we come back and then we can work on that. Remember, that problem doesn't come to fruition until the 31st of January. This CR only gives us to the 21st of November. So we come back, we start negotiating these things. But the reason why this is difficult to negotiate is just that. It's difficult to negotiate. Even though we don't want to see anyone lose their health care, if we're having to subsidize the health care, there's a problem with the health care system in the first place. And we're not subsidizing the individuals, we're subsidizing the insurance companies. So therefore, the minds need to come together, but they don't need to come together by scaring our general public in a shutdown. We need to come back to work. We need to go to work on these problems. We're not saying they're not there and we don't need to work on them, but we can't be working on them while we're playing these games and you're holding these hostage. But if you look at our Democrat colleagues, many of the leaders on the other side, 13 times they voted to keep the government open with this same type of clean CR when Biden was in and gave quotes like, we shouldn't hold the American people hostage. We've got to make sure that we don't use it as a negotiating tool. Instead, we keep the government open so that we can continue to negotiate. That's exactly what they said. They were right then, they're right now, that would be right now, and that's what we're saying.
Congressman, our listeners and viewers should know that your 12th district in Illinois is not part of Chicago. It's
Not
down
at
the
all.
southern part of the state. You're closer to St. Louis than you are Chicago, actually, in the
Yeah, but actually,
western part of your district.
Yeah, St.
Go ahead.
Louis is the northern part of my district. St. Louis is the northern part of my
exactly.
district, and I have 1/3 of the state's land mass. So,
Well, so
my major
all of that
employer
said, you got a lot of farms there too. You got a
My
lot of
second
farms,
largest
Congressman, and I'm
employer is
wondering.
ag.
So what are you hearing from the White House on this? Does there need to be a bailout? Should it come from tariff money? How do you handle this? If they're not buying soybeans in China, what do you do?
Yeah, we've been talking with the administration on specifically that. The tariff money, some kind of situation to help many of these farmers through this time. Understand these farmers, many of them are 4 years into their banks. 4 years into their bank where they haven't turned a profit. You can only do that so long. This would be the time to give them that opportunity while we're building those markets. I'm really, really glad that he's meeting with Canada today. Now, let me explain this, that he was right, he needed to meet with Canada, because if you're a grain farmer, it's one thing. And USMCA was a good deal in itself. However, remember this, when you start talking certain key products like dairy, which we provide from Northern Illinois and Wisconsin, or would like to provide into Canada, Canada has a 400% tariff. When we start talking about 30%, that sounds amazing, that sounds huge. But Canada has 400% tariff on the United States. Hopefully, we can work through to get fair trade, like the president has always talked about, and I trust the president to do that.
What happens first, a farmer bailout or a deal with China that starts soaking up some of these soybeans?
So the way it looks right now is probably the using the tariff money to help those existing farmers, because we're so far into it, unless these negotiations go with China very, very quickly. Now remember, we have to renegotiate with China, because China, what they do is, when they allowed China into the World Trade Organization, they probably shouldn't have done that in the first place, because you're supposed to be a free government that would to be part of the world trade, but that happened. Ever since then, China will come in and they'll take the commodities, where it's soybeans or corn or whatever, and they're going to say they're going to purchase this large amount at the beginning of the planting season. Farmers will go out and plant all these the commodities, where corn or soybeans or wheat, and all of a sudden, then China says, "Oh, we don't need that much," which causes the market to fall. The commodity now is a cheaper rate, and now the farmers out there trying to figure out how he or she is supposed to get the rate that they need to even make a profit at all. And so that's the problem when we're dealing with China, why we need to push them back to the table. Because it's either
your farmers.
My farmers are hurt.
Your farmers feel like Lucy in the football here. Did they make off of the dollar figures that we're hearing about? Is it $10 billion the president puts in a fund? What do you need?
That dollar amount is being negotiated with the chairman right now, both in the House and the Senate. G.T. Thompson is working very hard with his staff to make sure and informing us as we're moving right now. Because, if farmers are going to make it through, then you want to provide them a little bit of help. But if they're really the ones that are young farmers, because the mega farms quite often, they hurt, but they've got enough in reserve. It's those that don't have in reserve. And so trying to get those numbers squeezed through the USDA and figuring that out is where we're at right now.
Really, really interesting.
I'm going to play a video about the female potential prime minister for Japan. Please go to my store, blood-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the heirloom barley. This is a high-density protein. It's a month's supply. You mix it with soft food, filtered water, or a smoothie, or even with milk, but take it every day. It'll help to detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals through superoxide dismutase. You can take this every day, and by bringing down inflammation and detoxifying your body, you're helping your immune system, your endocrine system, your vascular system, and your brain function. Super important. Please go to my store, blood-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the heirloom barley. Also, for the foundation of my anti-aging protocol, get the complete multivitamin. This is easy to digest, and this has the multivitamins that you need for proper enzymatic activity so your cells perform properly. Take it every day, drink it with filtered water. And take the probiotic. I have 2 types. You can get it in the powdered form or in the veggie cap form. Take it every day, and by taking a probiotic, you're improving your gut biome. That will help you to absorb your nutrients better. Your metabolism will improve. You will improve your immune system at your gut level. You're going to improve the communication between your gut and your liver, and your gut and your brain. You'll be able to sleep better. And with proper sleep, you're going to be detoxifying your central nervous system, consolidating memory. You'll be well rested. And by having proper sleep, you're going to slow down that aging process. A good gut biome provides a foundation for good health. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Another added benefit of taking a good probiotic is that over time, your skin will improve. The health of your skin will improve. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and stack the multivitamin with one of the probiotics as a foundation and detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals with the heirloom barley. So this is a powerful stack. So please go to my store, use discount 5, you get $5 off any order.
Wouldn't it be nice if work was just smooth? It can be. With Zoho, the smoothest, easiest, coolest.
Welcome back. Markets this morning are higher, continuing in uncharted record territory. The Dow Industrial is up another 29, the S&P up 1.25, and the Nasdaq higher by 25 after we hit new record highs in yesterday's trading session. Partly due to tech. I mean, Advanced Micro Devices, AMD, is surging again this morning after rising better than 23% yesterday, another 4% rally this morning following a 5-year multi-billion-dollar computing deal with OpenAI. OpenAI will take a 10% stake in AMD to help expand its chip rollout. Earnings season is also kicking off this week. We've got Delta coming out on Thursday, and then next week it will be a focus on major banks. JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, Bank of America will all report next Tuesday. Analysts are expecting S&P 500 earnings to be up about 5% year over year, led by technology and financials. Joining me now is Ironside's macroeconomic managing partner and director of research, Barry Knapp. Barry, great to see you. A lot to talk about in terms of catalysts for this market, whether it be third quarter earnings season about to kick off or the Federal Reserve cutting interest rates. What's your view for the fourth quarter and the year overall?
I think I agree with Mr. Lee that the market is likely to rally through the balance of the year. I do think that the most important driver, the sectors I would expect to perform best would be actually the Russell and small bank, Russell 2000 that is, and small banks, perhaps outperforming technology the rest of the way, at least through the balance of the year. As we get those rate cuts, the impact of rate cuts on return on equity profitability for small banks is going to be really profound. A year ago, when we went from that deep inversion and the Fed cut 100 basis points, return on equity jumped from 5% to 7.5%. This year, another 100 basis points of rate cuts will push that return on equity above 10%, which will allow them to earn out their cost of capital, start building assets again, accumulating mortgages, tighten the spread of mortgages to treasuries. It'll start a rebound in the housing market. So to me, that's the most exciting part of the story now. I know everyone sort of focuses on tech right now, but that story is getting increasingly difficult. We're not at the point where, I would argue we're 1999 yet, but when you see, all this vendor financing going on, the cross investment deals, it is a sign that, it's getting increasingly speculative. We haven't reached the points that we got to in 99 or 2000 where the telecom sector was spending some 80% of their cash flow on capital investment. They're only at about half that level right now. But nonetheless, I think that tech story is getting a little tired, and I prefer the cleaner, cheaper story, which is Fed rate cuts really boosting profitability for small companies and small banks in particular.
Well, you also have the potential for consolidation, right? You saw a major deal yesterday among two regionals, and that certainly moved those stocks. Do you expect consolidation to be part of the banking story as well? For the smaller banks, the larger ones are already up against their cap on deposits.
I do. I think there's three elements to the overall banking story. One is the regulatory environment, and that's going to continue to get looser for the next 3 years, regardless of what happens in midterms I would suspect that Treasury Secretary Bessent, maybe it's even a good question for you, when he interviews people for Fed chair, I suspect one of the most important questions is, what is your view around bank regulatory policy? Because Treasury Secretary Bessent's been quite clear. He thinks that that's really important. So a looser regulatory environment for the big banks and for the smaller regional banks is crucial. And I think it will be a tailwind for them. You rightly point out M&A for the smaller banking sector is going to be a real tailwind. And then, as I said, a steeper yield curve for those smaller banks is going to really boost profitability.
What do you think's going on today with the spike in the short-term yields? The 10-year is up 2 basis points right now, Barry. I want to get your take on interest rates and how many cuts you're expecting. As we're all expecting the Fed to cut rates, the yield on the 10-year is up 2 basis points, sitting at 4.16%. We also want to mention that we've got more to the tariff story. The president is imposing 25% tariffs on all medium and heavy duty truck imports beginning November 1st. This move could impact companies such as Stellantis, Daimler Truck, Volvo, and PACCAR, and also countries such as Mexico, the largest exporter of heavy trucks to the U.S.
Right, two really important concepts. Right now, I think the little bit of pressure we're seeing on the back end of the Treasury market is really related to global factors. It's the election in Japan caused a big spike in JGB yields. The Japanese are the biggest global investors in fixed income. It's a relative competitiveness story, right? If 30 and 40-year JGB yields are up a lot, there is an inclination for them to sell U.S. Treasuries and bring the money home. That's part of the story. The problems in the French government putting upward pressure on the back end of the Treasury market. I'm not really concerned about our Treasury market right now. The conditions are completely different than a year ago. All the concerns about excess supply really have dissipated. And so I think the Treasury market's fine. And as I said, if we do get the rate cuts, that's going to really create small bank demand for mortgage-backed securities, which is going to boost the Treasury market. So Treasury market's fine for me. The tariff story is a little, is sort of taking a different tact here. We've been avoiding any of the consumer-facing sectors. So consumer discretionary, which would include Stellantis, auto companies for sure, consumer discretionary, and consumer staples companies all year. And you can see pressure on profit margins from these tariffs. There's no ability to pass prices through to the final consumer. It's why inflation has been coming down, and inflation break-evens are unchanged this year. So I would still avoid those sectors. I suspect you'll get some people to buy them out of earnings season thinking, okay, this is the worst of it, it's over. But that effect is still going to linger. The effective tariff rate's gone from 2.5% to 12%. It's probably going to 15%. So there's still some more, to be absorbed in profit margins and by, of course, the exporters in China and Mexico and the like. So I still stay away from those sectors and focus on things that will benefit from stronger investment as a consequence of the big, beautiful bill act. So that's sort of how we're positioned, is long industrials and short the other stuff.
Any thoughts on Japan now that we've got the first female prime minister on her way in? Larry Lindsay yesterday from the Lindsay Report wrote, President Trump will find Ms. Takaichi offers both a very useful ally in his confrontation with Xi Jinping and a tough negotiator on bilateral trade and economic relations. To put it in Trumpian terms, she is setting out to make Japan great again. Barry, any thoughts there in terms of this new prime minister, first female prime minister in Japan?
Yeah, no, it's quite a cultural change there for sure. We're long Japan. I like the equity market. My understanding is she's fancied herself a Margaret Thatcher disciple, which of course would really thrill me, but we'll see. There's lots of concerns. She's going to borrow money. She's talking about cutting taxes. It's always viewed by the left as the same thing. It's not the same thing. Cutting taxes drives private sector investment, productivity, and is a big net positive. If she's going to lower tax rates, I'm all in on her, and I'll probably add to my Japanese position.
Yeah. Do you care about the U.S. government shutdown yet?
I missed the payroll report, but other than that, not really. Government spending. Listen, Medicaid spending went up 50% from 2019 through 2024. Government spending has to be put on a path back to 20% of GDP. It's currently at 23%. So good first steps were taken in the Big Beautiful Bill Act to tighten Medicaid eligibility and the like. If the Republicans crater on this, there's no way back to 20%, government spending being 20% of GDP. It runs through healthcare. We have to rationalize that. That to me is a big longer-term issue for the treasury market.
Most people understand that at this point. Very great to
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. Boomer Boost has 68 nutrients. It has a very comprehensive compound profile shown on the screen here. You can also read the label on my website. And Boomer Boost will focus multiple systems. It'll focus on heart, vascular system, brain function, musculature, rev up your metabolism, increase your energy levels. And over time, you are going to slow down the aging process. Super important. And within 72 hours of taking this, you will start to notice more energy, a steady burn of energy. It's not spiking and have a crash of energy. It's a steady burn of energy. You're going to have more vitality. You're going to be wanting to be active. Super important to take every day. This should be part of your anti-aging protocol. But again, it targets your brain function, your musculature, your heart, your vascular system, revs up your metabolism. Helps with building muscle, do some resistance training. It's a great supplement. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And over time, you're also going to be able to control your A1C levels. If you stack this with gladiator barley or heirloom barley, you'll be able to get further benefits by bringing down inflammation, soaking up free radicals, detoxifying your body, and building muscle. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's go to Bloomberg.
Netanyahu, but let's remember what these talks are being described as right now, yesterday and today, as technocratic talks. Really talks about this first phase, like things as basic as the sequencing. Does Hamas have access to the hostages, both living and deceased, in order to fulfill, if they decide to, their end of this deal? And yet again, Hamas has still not agreed to any of that. And so we do have a ways to go. And speaking of Netanyahu, he is feeling pressure both internally and externally. We have these really striking polls from Israel in the last day or so, showing that about 2/3 of Israelis are saying that Netanyahu should take responsibility for the attacks and resign. We're seeing that a good substantial portion believe that Israel has committed genocide. Those numbers are reflected by Israelis or Jews who live in the United States. And of course, the White House is seeing those polls as well. So there is a lot of pressure on Netanyahu. But of course, there's a lot of pressure on the Hamas political wing as well, because what are they going to have to do? They are going to have to sign their death warrant. And that is going to be very hard for any individual or group to do. But that's essentially what would have to happen for this deal to go through.
Do you mean political death warrant, Jeannie?
Sorry about that. Absolutely, political death warrant, because this says that they are disarmed, that there may be amnesty for fighters who denounce violence, but that the group itself will be disbanded and have no role in a potential future Palestinian state. And that is, as you can imagine, just like individuals, states act the same way. Very, very hard to imagine that the political and military end come to an agreement on that. They may, but they would be signing their own political death warrant there.
It does certainly sound like it. Rick, I'm assuming you look at it this way as well as obviously Benjamin Netanyahu does. He's calling for the elimination of Hamas. To what extent does that lead to a potential rebranding, however, with political leaders in Gaza assuming the role of leadership in some other group?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it goes without saying that Prime Minister Netanyahu said at the time, 2 years ago, that the operation that he will overtake is the complete and total destruction of Hamas. And that has not happened to today. There are still people who
would be considered leaders there, and they're the ones currently negotiating. Gene makes a good point. I'm not sure it's a political point. It actually is a death warrant for these individuals, because we only have to remember the 1972 Munich Olympic massacre, and Israel at that time said the same thing. We will hunt down the people who did this, and we will destroy them. And Operation Wrath of God did just that. It took decades, but at the end of the day, the people who perpetrate this attack 2 years ago on Israel will feel the wrath of Israel. And so this is a heavy negotiation. There'll be efforts to try and get leadership sanctuary in other cities, but they all know what we know, which is that Israel will always look for opportunities to vanquish their enemies who perpetrated these horrible crimes on their people. And that has got to be part of the negotiation that's going on today. And so, yes, there are a lot of technical issues that have to be figured out. The 20-point plan is not even close to being a comprehensive plan. But at the end of the day, all parties are now in one location hashing this out, which we have not seen happen heretofore. And I think the world is keeping pressure on these groups to try and come to an end to this carnage that's been going on now for 2 years. It's an important moment, Jeannie, in our final minute here in our conversation. With the political leadership of Hamas then, following the signing of any deal, essentially just go into hiding in Doha? They can never go back to Gaza, right?
Yeah, I think that's an open question, and it's a really important one, because what history shows us is that any time you destabilize a leadership, whether you describe it as evil or tyrannical or democratic or otherwise, another group is going to come in and fill that power gap, and that group can be worse than the group that preceded it. We've seen that repeatedly. And of course, as the leading democracy in the world, we must always remember we do owe to the Palestinians a right of self-determination as to how they live peacefully.
Jeannie Shanzano and Rick Davis tackling some heady issues with us today on Balance of Power, and I thank you both for the insights, and we'll keep you posted on talks in Cairo. We're back to the government shutdown next in our conversation with Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury, only here on Blue.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the nattokinase. Nattokinase is fibrinolytic. It's going to break up clots and help to improve your lipid profile. Super important to take, and it's very important to take during the fall and the winter season, because there's going to be people that are going to have a clotting issue. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Take the nattokinase every day for your cardiovascular health, but also take it during the fall and the winter. You're going to need it. Vitamin D3. It stacks well with vitamin K2. This will help to absorb calcium, do some resistance training, and guess what? Your bone density will improve. That's super important. Also, D3 and K2 will help your cardiovascular health by reducing calcium depositing and help to pull some of that calcium depositing out of your plaque formation. So please go to my store and get the vitamin K2 and D3. D3 also helps to get cells to go into apoptosis if they're infected. That's going to be super important in the fall and the winter. So you better stock up on your vitamin D3. Also take my magnesium and zinc to improve the efficacy of vitamin D3. And if you take vitamin D3 and vitamin K2 together, it reduces the severity of what's coming in the fall and the winter. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great supplements I offer. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. That's the end of my broadcast. Thank you for listening, and have a nice day.